Good evening. Welcome to Athens City Council. Tonight is Monday, December the 11th, 2006. This evening, City Council is meeting in special session. That's the reason we're here at 7 p.m. And after City Council's special session, we will have a series of committee meetings. So first, we do have a quorum with 5 members of council present. We expect a 6th to be here shortly. Ordinances for third reading. Ordinance 13106, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the operation of the Athens City Transportation System for the period commencing January 1, 2007, and declaring an emergency. Member Patterson.
Mr. President, I move adoption of 13106.
Second.
This is just our usual ordinance to enter into a contract for our bus system. And so I recommend that everyone vote for it.
He's here.
Motion and a second to adopt ordinance 13106. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 13206, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 23, zoning code, to provide the Municipal Arts Commission must recommend murals. Member Patterson.
Mr. President, I move that we amend 13206.
Second.
The amendment being recommended is that we say painted, under 6, painted walls or murals or other similar artwork on public property if recommended by the Municipal Arts Commission and approved by City Council. Got that, Debbie? Okay.
Motion and a second to amend on ordinance 13206. Further discussion on amendment only.
Debbie?
Would murals on private property then be related to the sign ordinance in the zoning code?
Well, this is exactly what I got into with this whole thing. I went to the sign ordinance. The sign ordinance implies that, and I have to say implies, it doesn't explicitly say that they're exempt on public property as well. So, or on private property. I did talk to Gary Hunter about it. He said that we could not pass something, it would not hold up on private property. I then went to the Planning Commission and spoke to them about it, and first of all discovered that it requires a public hearing, but they were talking about that they are ready to take a look at the sign ordinance and go back through it and perhaps make some revisions, that this is only one of the places where it's a little quirky. And so what the recommendation of the Planning Commission was that we go ahead and amend this, then table it, and then after the public hearing, go ahead and pass this little thing because it'll take at least 6 months to revise that sign ordinance. Other questions?
Other comments?
No.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
You want me to stand?
Yes, please come.
Greg Broadhurst on Granville Avenue, and concerning the sign ordinance, yeah, it definitely needs some improvement. I've had some conversations with the code enforcement director about some issues related to the sign ordinance, and here's my feeling about it, and I addressed that to City Council and to Councilwoman Patterson. Maybe we ought to do it all at the same time. You know, that's all. Because I don't think because of the fact that I feel like it would be better to just look at the whole thing, and actually I've got a number of notations concerning Title 23, and specifically as pertains to all different kinds of signage. So as they have been concerning themselves, or will concern themselves when talking about the city attorney and the code director, and with input from council and citizens, that perhaps this ordinance that you're suggesting, maybe it would be better tabled until that time, until all of the, is that what I'm understanding you saying?
But
It-
what is on the table right now? And
What?
the motion
An
before us is
amendment.
to amend
Right.
ordinance 13206. And Greg, at this point, I have to insist that we hold all of our comments to the amendment only,
Okay, sure.
so that we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I understand. So, yeah, my
Maybe in a
comment
few
was,
moments, we'll ask you back for the comments. that you're
Actually,
making.
nothing we're doing is going to disagree with that. Just later, 3 months from now, we might disagree with him.
okay, I guess that's really, that's getting to the point. I was kind of like a sidebar, but concerning the same
Right.
issue in the whole. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the amendment only? Member Weil?
Can you run that through again, the amendment?
Yes, murals. Section 6 is murals, and then
Okay.
it says painted wall murals or other similar art. We're adding on public property if recommended by the Municipal Arts Commission and approved by the City Council.
Okay, so the amendment is actually to distinguish public property from private property.
That's correct.
This is in Title 23, so has this been recommended by the Planning Commission? I assume it has?
They suggested that we take this route. That we
Amend it,
do this,
table
yes.
it, and let it sit?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Just
Okay.
a question
Member Sands?
that has to, this whole thing, in this, maybe this is already in there, a definition of what mural is?
It is not. However, that we also discussed that at the Planning Commission. It was suggested, well, I guess I suggested it, that the Arts Commission pursue some other municipal definitions. And while this is presumably sitting on the table, that we can find out more information of what the definition is that is used in other cities.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment only. All those in favor of the amendment as stated?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been amended and read for the first time.
Mr. President, I move that we table 13206.
Second.
And the reason for the tabling is to wait for, first of all, a public hearing on the issue because it's a change to the zoning code, and then subsequently, perhaps the sign ordinance will be changed. But this would take care of it for the time being, and because we have murals underway, I felt it was, that we should take it off the table as soon as the public hearing has occurred.
Motion and a second to table ordinance 132. Is there further discussion on tabling the ordinance? All those in favor of tabling ordinance 13206?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been tabled. Ordinance 13306, an ordinance closing Park Place and a portion of the intersection of Mulberry and South Court Streets on Saturday, February 10th, 2007, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for the grand opening celebration at the new Baker Center at Ohio University. Member Flowers.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance O-13306.
Second.
This is an ordinance, as you stated, just a simple street closing in front of the new Baker Center for their dedication ceremony to take place in February on that Saturday, of which I've already notified council that there is a basketball game, but not until 2 o'clock that day.
Further discussion. Member Bain.
Mr. President, I have two issues with the closing of the street. One of them is something Councilmember Flowers asked me about. It seems that we are already widening the sidewalk and making a bike lane, and I don't believe council had any input on that. And so I'm a little concerned about that. Sort of minor stuff, and then a couple, 2, 3 people make a big decision about taking a lane of traffic off a street. At least the university announcement system said that they were widening the sidewalk. And the second thing is, the university and its representatives blew us off with respect to our lot. And twice?
lots.
3 lots. And one of them has collapsed, I noticed, and I was
sidewalk,
figuring,
you mean?
the sidewalk, yes.
I
was
think
figuring.
something landed on it.
I don't know. So I'm going to vote
Careful,
no.
they'll blame us.
Yeah, well, we let them take bad goods.
Okay. Member Weil.
I'm also going to vote no, mostly for the lot reasons. That's not been resolved. We're sitting there with some property that has been taken from us and made useless. So, as well as the fact we may have actually a conflict of interest. We're helping the university with this, just
my
to show the
goodness.
absurdity of it.
Yes.
But I'll vote anyway on it.
Okay. Further comments on ordinance 13306? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
I am showing a 4-2 vote. If the clerk could let the record show where the votes lie. The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 13406, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 7, Traffic Code pertaining to handicap parking penalties. Member Flowers.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 13406.
Second.
This is an ordinance that is just increasing our penalties on the handicap parking. It'll be increased to $250 to comply with state code.
For further discussion. Member Weil.
It's about time.
It's good to get it done.
About time. I'm sorry. Was that it?
Yes.
Further discussion. All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 13406?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 13506, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of chlorine, fluoride, salt, caustic soda, and sulfur dioxide. Are you building a bomb, Member Bain?
You better
I
believe
do that
it.
every year at this time.
Mr. President, I move adoption of 0135.
Second.
06. 013506 does, authorizes the purchase in a contractual basis, certain reagents that we need across a number of funds. I would like to, at this point, nudge and remind the mayor that we would like, at least I would like some, and I would like the record to show that once again, I'm noting the need to have some protection over the salt, both containment and I hope in the new year. Please, pretty please. It's been a year. Thank you.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 13506?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 13606, an ordinance authorizing the cleaning and repair of water wells. Again, Member Bain.
Mr. President, move adoption of 013606,
Second.
another annual event where we clean 2 of our wells.
That sums it up, doesn't it? Further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 136?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. On to ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 13706, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit a request to the Ohio Department of Development to use currently held revolving loan fund dollars and/or program income fund for the leasing the proposed market pavilion at the University Mall as a community development project to be used to support small business development, and authorizing the mayor to pursue additional grant funds and accept donations for said purpose. Member Phillips.
Mr. President, I move that we consider 013706 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that this wonderful project that is going to be of great benefit to the citizens of Athens and the surrounding area needs additional funding beyond the revolving loan fund. And if we approve this now, it's going to help in leveraging additional grant dollars in a timely way so that we can get the project underway.
Further discussion? All those in favor of considering ordinance 13706 under suspension of the rules?
Aye.
Those opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of 013706.
Second.
This will authorize the mayor to submit a request to use our revolving loan fund money for the public market project out on East State Street, which will help a number of our local small businesses and the farmers and a lot of the citizens here in Athens. It's a very exciting project.
Further discussion on ordinance 137? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 13806, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Athens County Convention and Visitors Bureau to allocate funds to be used in support of tourism development grants. Ordinance 13906, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application for grant funds through the Ohio Department of Transportation for municipal bridge funds. Ordinance 14006, an ordinance to make appropriation for current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Athens, Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31, 07. Ordinance 14106, an ordinance authorizing staffing levels, a non-union pay scale, and slotting for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 07, repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 14206, an ordinance authorizing a stop-loss medical insurance contract and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 14306, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Soil and Water Conservation District. Ordinance 14406, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to file an application with the state of Ohio to participate in the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant Economic Development Program and declaring an emergency.
Mr. President, at this time, I move that we consider O-14406 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Second?
Second.
This request is similar to the one that Councilmember Phillips explained for the Market Pavilion. The intended partner with the city here intends to be borrowing some more funds for this proposed residential healthcare facility, and we need to move this up so that the timetables can coincide better.
Further discussion on ordinance 14406. All those in favor of suspending the rules?
Aye.
Those opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of O-14406.
Second.
Again, this is an opportunity for the mayor to negotiate with an entity that would like to participate in our our revolving loan fund through the Community Development Block Grant Small Cities Program and the Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund. The participant and the mayor would both be negotiating with each other and with the community block grant funding sources in order to come up with a program that will allow us to make these funds available. And there's an announcement here that I'm a little confused about. It says a second public hearing will be held December 18th, 2006 at 7 p.m. in City Hall to discuss and comment on the earlier proposed CDBG application, which we had a public hearing on May 15th, and also this proposed issue. So even though we're passing this enabling legislation for the mayor to continue negotiations, we'll still be discussing this issue next week. Paul?
What was the deadline again for this?
I don't see it in the application. Mayor, is there a deadline here?
There is not a deadline here, but the way CDBG looks at it, because they have it's a competitive program, but they count everything on when it's received. And when they get, the council legislation, et cetera, so moving it up could save a week. That's about it.
Okay, and this is for the development, nursing home development on Columbus Road? Is that
Yes.
what I'm saying? Okay.
Any funds that flow through the CDBG
Return to us.
grant return to us, the city. So it would be a plus for us financially.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 14506, an ordinance amending the 2006 appropriation ordinance. Ordinance 14606, an ordinance adopting the update natural hazard mitigation plan for the city of Athens. Ordinance 14706, an ordinance amending the Athens City Code Title 21 Subdivision Regulations, Chapter 21.08, requirements for construction of improvements. Those are all the items on tonight's special session agenda, and having addressed all, we stand adjourned. Now on to the City Services Committee. Member Bain.
I'd like to call to order the City Services Committee and introduce Rhonda, who's going to talk about composting. Rhonda?
Composting and community gardening.
Oh, yes. Some of you know her from past.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Clark, and I'm the Director of Community Food Initiatives. And the City Council, the City of Athens, graciously gave us $10,000 in January of this year, and this is a report on what we did. And then we would like to propose that we would like to try again for another $10,000 in 2007. So, ready to go? Okay, there's the input A right there. Our mission is Community Food Initiatives is dedicated to helping people grow their own food. CFI works in Athens County to promote self-sufficiency as it relates to basic food production. We help people acquire the tools they need to grow a garden, including seeds, plants, tools, land, and water. And we also have workshops where we educate them on how to plant, maintain, harvest, cook, and preserve their gardens, as well as how to compost and save seeds. This completes a yearly cycle for producing one's own food. The CFI history, we started as a project of ACENET in 1992. We became a separate 501c3 in 95. And then we started various projects from 99 with the free seeds. And then 2000, we began working with the Athens Community Gardens. In 2003, we took over management of the community gardens. And then that's when we began our composting partnership with UUFA. And we started our Edible Schoolyard project and Seed Savers groups. The programs that we have include the Athens Community Gardens. We have 2 sites now. We have the Hope Gardens that are on East State Street over by the Hope Apartments. And then the West Side Community Gardens, which are over by the ball fields. And then we have our Edible Schoolyard project, where we're working with Trimble Local School and East Elementary. And then we have community composting, CFI Seed Savers, where we teach people how to save seeds. And then we have the Free Seed project, where we give out free seeds that are not necessarily can be saved. And we have food preservation workshops. The Appalachian Harvest is a gleaning project with ACENET, and we have our Gardening Angels, which are our volunteers. Here's some pictures of the Hope Gardeners that we were working very closely with. This is Mike and Tanya, and they live over in the Hope Apartments. We've got some quotes here from Ilgard. The 2 adult Hope Gardeners were very excited about their experience, and they attribute the garden experience to why their 5-year-old son ate zucchini for the first time, and they were very excited about that, and they had a great time with the gardens. Some of our Hope Garden achievements included 14 new gardeners, 10 gardens. We supplied seeds, tomato plants, and other starts. We built compost bins for a composting demonstration site on the east end of town. We gave composting education. We amended the soil, 3 sets of tools, wheelbarrow, irrigation system, and food preservation workshops, and we created a gardener contract. We planted 2 peach, 2 pear, 2 cherry, 1 apricot tree. We planted 2 grapevines. We became a website for Job and Family Services. We're working with Steve Jewell to expand the gardens in 2007. We had a very exciting time with a kids garden that was developed there, and the kids produced beans, beets, and lettuce. They didn't get the garden until August, so they couldn't get all the other stuff in. Next year, we're planning on a much bigger kids garden. The city brought in 4 loads of wood chips that we set beside our composting bin, and we had our volunteers bring in a load of manure for composting. The West Side Community Gardens here, supported by Sisters of St. Joseph, City of Athens, ACENET. We also expanded there with garden space. We added nut trees, and blueberry bushes are coming in the spring. Here's some pictures of the winter gardens. Here's some pictures of some gardeners. In 2005, we grew by almost 1,400 square feet, and we had 31 people growing gardens. And it was a very tough year. That was the year we had 90 days without rain, and it was a very difficult year for the gardeners. In 2006 was much better. We expanded again by about 1,600 square feet. We opened up the new site at Hope Gardens. We increased the number of gardens to 57 over both gardens. Increased the number of plots to 50. We planted 3 pecan trees at the west side gardens. We cut the soil for blueberry bushes. Again, the Hope Garden fruit trees. And we had 18 food preservation workshops. Right there is Joyce Brown from OSU Extension. Some of the workshops we had starting vegetable starts, transplanting vegetable starts, composting on both the west side and the Hope, gleaning and tomato canning, how to preserve berries, canned corn, bean seed saving, how to blanch, preserving your fall harvest, composting, green manure, that's a big thing, putting rye on your garden in the winter, how to put your gardens to sleep, how to make kimchi, a West Side Neighborhood Association composting, garden cleanup days, and how to preserve horseradish is happening right at this moment, actually. Here's some potlucks and composting workshop. These are the gardeners on the west side coming together for a potluck. Here's a chart of what I just kind of said to you, a lot of the information about our progress over the last 3 years. And then the amount of food preserved was substantial this year, and this does not include what Mary Reed preserved from her. She sells pesto at the farmer's market, and so that doesn't include all the basil she grew there and preserved for selling. That's just home consumption. And then there's some pretty pictures. The majority of the gardeners felt that by participating in the community gardens, they had improved their diets through eating more fruits and vegetables, decreased the amount of money they spent on food, became more physically active, and decreased the amount of fast food that they consumed. We surveyed the gardeners. This is our 3rd year surveying the gardeners, and ILGARD compiles the surveys and analyzes it and gives us the data. And this is data from their from those surveys. Overall evaluation conclusions from ILGARD, community food initiatives, community gardens, and seed and plant distribution are making an impact on low-income residents' access to critical means for home food production. Here's some pictures of Mary Reed and her pesto production, which shows it was helping with the economy in the Athens, with helping jobs. Here are our compost bins being assembled at on West State Street. This is a 6-bin system. And we moved a lot of compost through these systems. The gardeners are becoming very proficient at adding compost to their gardens and improving the soil. It's very sandy down there because it's in a floodplain, and so the soil tilth needed a lot of work. It's not holding a lot of water, so the gardeners are very interested in improving their soil down there. Here's a picture of some compost. The Hope Composting demonstration site, see it way over on the left there. The composting progress, the number of volunteers picking up buckets in 2005 was 8, and 2006 is 4. The number of restaurants was from 19 to 10, and the gallons of food scraps went down. Everything went down because we had volunteers that were not reliable, and so it was taking too much of our coordinators' time to have to go and pick up all these buckets. So we started focusing more on backyard education and the business plan, and we still had 16 cubic yards of finished compost, despite the lower numbers, though. That was we ended up donating to the community gardens. Both sides got it. Both the Hope and the Athens gardens, West Side gardens got compost. Some of our 2006 composting achievements: quarterly composting, community composting partners meetings. We're keeping update on the OU Student Center composting system that they're creating. Presentation to the Athens Hocking Solid Waste District, converse with the Athens Hocking County Commissioners on a large-scale composting system. We're in talks with them. We're working now with Roger Bale. Composting displays at the Athens Farmers Market and Sustainability Festival. Composting workshop at the festival. The new Hope demonstration site. And then we're doing research on the increased nutritional value of produce that is grown in composted soil so that we can give presentations on that. Again, more workshops. Wrote a composting grant to Ohio Environmental Education Fund. We're also working composting in our edible schoolyard projects, where we go into the schools, and we're working with East Elementary in their composting project, and we're trying to get vermiculture with worm composting. into Trimble, into the Trimble local schools, and then we're going to probably be working with a couple other schools starting in 2007. We haven't decided which schools those are yet. Okay, I thought I'd throw in some edible schoolyard research in progress because I've been doing research on what happens when kids don't get the fruits and vegetables they need and people don't, and all my research is pointed to this. Compromised ability to resist illnesses, health problems. Children have more occurrence of health problems such as stomach aches, headaches, colds, ear infections, and fatigues, what keeps them out of school, makes it difficult for them to learn, and they're having a hard time keeping up. One of the main impaired cognitive functioning and diminished capacity to learn. So our children need a certain amount of fruit and vegetables in order to help them learn the things in school they need to learn. This is a picture of the Trimble edible schoolyard project that we have. And here is East Elementary. And then in the 2005 edible schoolyard project achievements, we cultivated a 35 by 200 foot garden. Preschool class planted sunflowers. Preschool teacher organized a week-long lesson on seed germination and finished the week in the garden. Fourth grade math class planted pumpkins and carrots. We grew tomatoes, peppers, squash, basil, and marigolds in the high school greenhouse. We received a grant to pay for irrigation system, wheelbarrow, and tools. Worked with school administrators and staff to gather support for the project. Let's see here. We were working closely with the School Health Action Committee, the Trimble Local School Health Action Committee. And gardens were put in the Health Action Plan. And we were also put in the wellness policy that all the schools were to have done by July of this year. And then we've done a significant amount of research on food insecurity and health effects on children and their ability to learn. Okay, there we go.
So Rhonda, you could have stopped when you said you had the kid eating zucchini, and
I know.
That's always been a challenge for most of us. So the proposal is, and especially with respect to the city, the main thing is to continue the movement toward composting. Is that right? I mean, sort of the centralized site.
Yeah,
And-
we're kind of working two ways. We have a backyard composting education campaign, and we want a large-scale composting system that will help draw stuff out of the landfill, keep it from going into the landfill, I guess, and then compost it in the city and to be able to turn around and sell it back to our own local, whoever wants it, landscapers, people. We're finding that there's a large demand for it. We don't really have any hard time getting rid of it. We can't necessarily sell it, but we're working with the Ohio EPA right now to figure all that out. And we're looking for a site. We had a gentleman approach us on the last meeting on Thursday that he has a farm that he's looking to start a large-scale, out on Fisher Road, a large-scale composting system out there. And then we're also looking for a site. We're just looking for a site that's EPA approved and is room for progress, close to a major highway. So.
So what you're asking us for is 10,000 more to continue the process of working on the simultaneous education on backyard composting and the movement toward a centralized facility, which would include collection and cooperation. Okay, so that's the proposal.
And
Doesn't
last time it was 5,000 for composting and 5,000 for community gardens.
That's what I understood as last
Okay.
time.
I couldn't
And
remember
I
that.
think that we funded it out of Athens Enhancement Fund.
Okay. That maybe we did it out of garbage. Okay. Whoever, one's nodding head, the other one has a hand.
No, I thought I remembered it
You're
came
the
from-
compost guy.
I thought it came from community enhancement.
Okay, so we could run that one again.
And
If there
just
are
to
no-
reiterate what you have said is the city's goal in this, council's goal, I believe, is to develop a community-wide composting program that at the moment would concentrate on yard waste, leaves, grass cutting, grass clippings, brush that we do collect now, but we don't utilize what we collect. And we would like to cooperate with the county entities and include them. And we've actually begun discussions toward that direction. So, and yes, it would include a pickup program, just as we have recycling pickup.
And we're moving in that direction.
Yes, we are.
Okay, Carol?
I think it's a tremendous program, and I was very much in favor of contributing to it last year. What I'd like to see before we do this again is the financials of this whole program.
A budget,
And the
you mean?
percentage, a
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
The percentage that is local. And, you know, because at this point, it looks to me pretty much like a grant. And so we ought to have grant-type information, which includes the budget.
Okay. Can you do that? Rhonda, Leslie?
Yeah.
Okay, and any others? Amy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've been following closely what CFI does, and it's great. Very impressive. I just wondered if you could touch on, just for my own curiosity, on the community gardens. How does one go about getting involved with a community garden or being a gardener?
You would email me at cfi@frognet.net. And then we just set up an appointment, and I meet you out there and give you a spot.
Great.
That's usually, and then we have a map, and then I give you a little tour, and we have a little contract, and we go through the contract and things like that, a little paperwork, but it's generally pretty low-key. We haven't had to do much advertising because we've gotten so many people just coming from, you know, I don't want to get a huge influx and have like
Sure.
50 at one time, you know, so, yeah. So just call me or email me, and we'll set up a time.
Thank you.
So a couple questions. I think you pointed out you've been growing quite a bit each year, so what is your total square footage for the, let's say, the West Side Community Gardens?
I don't remember that number.
Did she say 1,347, or was
I
that
thought
what she added?
1,300 is
It's
what went
85 by
up.
55, I want to say, but I don't know,
Doesn't matter.
125 by 55, but I don't know that. the
Okay.
multiplication.
What is the contract like? I also want to reiterate what Carol was saying about, just to see what a budget looks like on this. My experience with giving tourism grants and stuff like that, when I was sitting down there, is usually they had to submit a budget from the previous year, just so everybody knew what kind of mix ended up in the stuff.
It's about 6,000 square
So,
feet.
what's the question about the contract or
68.75.
the-
The other question I had was the contract. What are the requirements for a community gardener to contract with, I guess?
It's nothing out of the, you know, it's keep your tools in your garden so they don't, you know, because the city mows around the perimeter of the garden, so anybody who's on the outside, yeah, you have to make sure there's no tools on the outside edge of that, make sure there's no tools within the pathways.
So it's more like etiquette rather than an actual
Kind of, and we
contract.
ask people to give 10% of their produce back to the community.
Okay.
And we give them a list of different, like, suppers and
Entries.
UCM, different places that want it or don't want, you know, and then we have them make the contact with that group, and they bring it, and so, and we bring, I haven't had to bring any in a couple years, because they've brought it all. They bring it all, they make you know, the gathering place gets some, and different
Pantries
places, they
do,
pick
too.
places, and some people give it to the low-income people living next door to them. And I'm not, you know, we're not particular about where they give it, as long as it's given back to the community. Timothy House gets a lot of our produce, because of its location.
Okay.
And then, gosh, it's just things like etiquette, you use the compost, if you can't maintain your gardens, please call CFI. You know, we suggest you be a member of CFI, it's pretty general and straight, so.
Okay. Just wondered.
Any other comments, Amy?
I have a question about the composting. You had mentioned that we're moving towards pickup.
Slowly.
Okay, I was just wondering, well,
Unfortunately.
in the meantime, is there a way that residents can bring composting materials, or is there anything set up in terms of that?
Well,
You get
that would
things from
probably
businesses?
breach an OEPA standard, we really can't do that right now, but we do, you know, some of the gardens do bring some of their, you know, they throw the produce in there and things like that, so we don't really have a place that the citizens of Athens can bring to yet. We're not at that point where we have to have certain angles of the slope and floodplain issues and stuff like that dealt with, so, no, not right this moment.
Okay.
But you'd be willing to help with somebody wanting to do, or at least give information on a backyard composter?
Yeah, we would be very willing to teach people how to do backyard gardening. Because CFI finds that, you know, that if you do backyard gardening, most likely that's going to go into your garden, and your backyard garden. And then, of course, that's going to increase your food production and the healthy food in your diet and stuff like that, which fits our mission.
Thank you for talking so fast, Rhonda. Oh, I see Jim has a...
Just to add to what Councilmember Flowers just mentioned, however, at the present time, the city does, during this season, pick up leaves at no charge in various methods, and individuals can contact the service garage on West State Street to arrange for pickup of brush and other yard waste, again, at no charge from the city. But we're not utilizing that in a composting situation, and that's what we want to go to.
Okay. All right. Thank you again, Rhonda.
I have
and-
2 things here. I set a packet of paper at everybody's desk up there that, it has the ILGARD report on CFI and then some articles. And then I have this as another project we're doing, is we're creating a document of seeds that are vegetable seeds that are being saved in the area so that we can kind of have an idea of who's saving what and where. And we're not a seed bank, we're a bank of information on where seeds are. So if, I brought some of these for council to take if they would like to see what's happening with this part of our project.
Okay. So one of the things that I guess I know I've said before is that when I was on a field trip to Ohio State, the one thing they said is, thanks to people like Rhonda and Leslie, we're known for our food production, farmers market, and so on. So happy to continue this relationship. And I hope by the end of next year, we'll be ready to roll on something within the city. It's nice to be known for something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhonda, for talking fast.
Thank you.
All right.
Leslie,
And I am just excited at the way the overhead, or the LCD worked. Isn't that great? Okay, thank you.
First time it's
Cable
worked
people.
the way we had hoped it would. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Very, very
Way to go,
nicely
Scott.
done. Health Department contract, is that somebody else's? Debbie, did you put this?
I think
Okay.
that's the wellhead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was thinking it was the other one. Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Yes, we have received a proposed agreement with the Health Department for the implementation of the wellhead protection enforcement. And basically, this, I look at it, and I believe the mayor does as well, as kind of a trial program of perhaps this could work. It might be just a one step in a continuum. There might be other options in terms of having an individual on staff eventually that handles these things. But 6 months ago, representatives of the EPA came and met with the Wellhead Committee and was anxious to do workshops with business people and residential within the wellhead protection area to explain to them more about how they can be compliant with the wellhead protection ordinance. And the meeting kind of ended with, well, we didn't really know who was in charge. We didn't really have an enforcement agency or person in place. And until we had a way to sort of process things, that the meetings would be premature. So this really does answer that. You had a proposed agreement, and basically it says that they will be able to better enforce the wellhead protection regulations, that they will do inspections, investigate complaints, inventory new and existing facilities. That was all done initially when the wellhead protection ordinance was put into place. It's now time to follow up on those, plus any new ones. Someone has to know how to go about doing it. And then the final portion of this is educational liaison, which would be someone who facilitates those meetings in addition to any school-age programs that might be developed. This proposes that the Health Department work in coordination with Crystal at the water plant and maintain reports, monthly reports for the city. It's a 20-hour-a-week program at $31.35 for the regular hours, $39.62 for overtime. I just kind of ran it a little bit here. It's somewhere a little over $30,000 to implement it for the year. And this would begin on January 2nd, '07, and run throughout the year. That's what I know. Question?
So are we're contracting with the county health department, is it one particular person will be contracting, or is it just going to be the pool of health inspectors?
The city-county health
City,
department,
county.
is it an individual or just whoever's available?
Yeah, it will be an individual, one we've worked with before.
Okay.
Okay.
And would that, a little more than 30,000 be about right?
I think in my rough budget, I used 35, just to, don't know
Okay.
what the overtime's gonna be potentially.
Right.
So, effective date is January 2nd. Are we going
January 1st is a holiday, that's why.
to, okay, good. But, so this will be on the agenda next week?
And suspend,
Well,
if we're going to do it. That
Well,
would
if
have
we
to
can't
be-
suspend, you can always postpone it 2 weeks too, right? I mean, we don't know if everybody's
Right.
going to be here.
Would you, oh, that's true.
We will see it next week.
We will
Yeah.
see it next week, but if we have enough people, should we suspend?
Just start on time.
To start on time, we would have to.
To start on time, but I think it's the amount and volume of work more than the timeliness.
So it doesn't really
It's really-
matter. Okay,
Council's call.
we could get the first reading. Yep.
So I don't know who's serving on the current committee, but the citizens who were involved in the work to develop the wellhead protection ordinance made a number of recommendations to council about implementation, including the idea of having a full-time person who's
Right.
doing education and enforcement. Have we heard from those folks about whether this is a reasonable step in
Right.
that direction?
In answer to your question, I haven't called people and said, are you okay with this? Some of the people that were originally involved are still involved. And this is a compromise. It really isn't the goal, but, and one of the things that we've talked about is that perhaps a half-time person who's a retired EPA person might be something that we would consider in the future. This is a way to get started and to have things in place.
It's better than nothing.
And I actually prefer the fresh out of school people with their organic chemistry brushed up and totally there, because that's what it is. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. We can keep going on this for a while anyway.
Oh, just an observation. Greg Broadhurst, Granville Avenue. With that $35,000 figure in mind, I was thinking of just what Dr. Boehner just said. And for a part-time person with the expertise to be able to perform the duties of the position and be certified as an environmental professional by the state of Ohio, I think is reasonable. So maybe, outsourcing that to another agency may be kind of short-circuiting getting this thing going. So that's just a perspective.
Right.
Okay.
And while you're there,
Yeah.
I might just say that really where this all came from was the very night that I was first elected on council. You said to me, well, now are you going to get us a wellhead protection ordinance? And my answer was, what's that?
Thanks,
So
Carol.
we've come a long way, and
Yeah,
thank you
we
very
have.
much for the nudge.
Thank you.
All right, so it'll be up for first reading, right?
Correct.
Okay, last year, we talked about the Stewart Street sidewalk, and I've had some pressure from my constituents to do some more sidewalks since we're a so-called walking city. And so I was wondering if we would agree that we would try to find out what the cost, what the situation would be if we would do only, let's say, the going down Grosvenor, the left-hand side, that's my proposal. The sidewalks there, go down and ask code to find out how many are not owner occupied. Just basically redo all the sidewalks. What?
I'm about all but two.
Yeah, and just say, let's go
I
for
can
it.
name the two.
And if the two are eligible for low and moderate income, we can pay for it. I'll
You're talking
write
about the
check.
uphill side or the downhill?
No, the uphill side.
Just wondering.
I'm teasing. I'll write my council check, I've done that before. All right, so that was in response to this, and so I'll write a formal request, and we can do a resolution maybe next time, asking to have that by the 1st of February, so we can get it done next year. along with maybe the other one. That
Good
would be
idea.
Stewart Street.
A resolution to get the specs on it?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Amy, I should have told you about this, but I got the note.
Yeah, it's not like we don't live next to each other.
It's not. I found out other stuff from you. All right, so that's the next thing, and then, and I think that, we have this, the people want us to continue to rebuild the sidewalks, and the people who own them can pay for them.
Yeah.
And I think they're, it's a much walked area. I wouldn't mind North Lancaster Street either, but, from basically, but one at a time. Let's see how this one
Well, yeah,
goes.
there's an entire list we could compose right now. Franklin,
Yeah,
all of
Franklin
them.
would be another one. Okay, and then Columbus Road update. I was wondering, and I forgot to ask the mayor about this, but could you tell us what's going on down there? Because Amy said she wished she'd known before she voted on it. That was a joke,
Well,
but,
it's a nursing home?
no, I'm talking about
Oh,
the
Which part of
utilities.
Columbus Road?
Oh, okay. Well, right, though, behind that.
Yeah, what's going on with the
Sewer?
traffic?
Yeah.
Just so the citizens know. Could you tell
It's
us?
the sewer.
And,
Well, when they're past where it's 4-lane now, so when they're working, even on the other side, you go down to 1 lane and you do traffic control to go around it.
okay, but what I really want to know, is this water or is it sewer or is it both?
That's just water.
Just water, okay, so there'll be another round on the other side of the street coming up.
Down as far as Circle Drive, but this one goes on down to.
A lot more traffic going up Joneswood
Oh, okay.
and down
well.
Columbia.
So that was just a request from me to find out where we were on that one. Okay, I don't have any miscellaneous except what comes under planning and development. Debbie?
You have things to add to my agenda?
Well, no, you know what they are already. You know what they are already.
All right, well, we have a lot of things on the Planning and Development Committee agenda. There are 2 that are on here, and there are 3 miscellaneous items that I know about. But I think we'll go ahead in the order that things are on there. We have folks here to present to us about the summit at Coates Run. I think we're mainly talking about the development agreement. And do you want to come up to one of the microphones and be able to talk with folks? Do you have any updates or additional information to the document you gave us when you were here before?
I'm going to give you a draft document. which you can review.
Great.
Yes.
Get it? Thanks.
Let folks know who you are. Get started.
Hello, I'm Rick Kirk with the Edwards Companies from Columbus. I'm here again to follow up on our previous discussion about the development agreement, which pertains to our proposed project called the Summit at Coates Run. From our last meeting, I took a few notes with my associate Chris here, and we have this package which is in draft form. We're going to ask for it back. You're welcome to look through it. It has lots of information which pertains to some of the questions that came up at the last discussion. The development agreement is part of what we are intending to present. It covers some of the intentions and commitments that we're making to the city of Athens with the project. This involves dirt moving, involves water, a water extension, water line extension, tie-in and loop, sanitary sewer extension, several items here that are listed, some of which are codes that we will comply with, and we can go through each one of these as we speak. I don't have any particular agenda. I'm just going to open up just a few items that were discussed and have been part of the discussion. Some questions about what variances would be tied to the PUD. Questions about where the fill might go from our site and how it will be placed. Been several questions about slope stability, questions about density, in several of those. I'm just going to, since we're in the informal session here, I'm going to speak and love to have questions, actually. At the last meeting, the mayor had talked about our commitment here, which was that we would keep the soil moving on-site and off the city streets. We intend to move soil on-site, and then excess soil will be moved on to the adjacent Ohio University site. We will need some easements for waterline extension, which will come up through Blackburn Road, across what will be the Stagecoach intersection, come across some private property and across the Ohio University property. We'll tie into our site and loop back down to Richland Avenue, tie in underneath to the courtyard site. Will enable the city to remove a booster pump, which would be, I think, a benefit to the city. It will allow the city and us to tie into the Carriage Hill project and their water line, which would take a booster pump offline. The loop system would enhance your city water pressures, provide better flow of your water. And we think the fact that we would install this would provide something that the city would be probably hard-pressed to do in the timeline that we would propose. The variances that we would be requesting with respect to the PUD is we are requesting that we have a project that has multiple buildings. We are requesting a parking variance, which would be 0.85 spaces per bedroom. We have an extensive amount of information that's available with regard to slope stability. This has been a topic of discussion from the time we got involved with this project and currently. I'll say that the site plan that we have now has been through, we've done an extensive amount of soil borings. The site that we have located now is on rock. That is as stable as anything I've ever been involved with. We will cut down to sandstone is what it is. And the typical component of the unstable soil conditions in the Athens area is involved with shale. So we've hired PSI, soil engineers, and they have geotechnical reports here which are available. We will, of course, go through and meet with the city engineering firm, Burgess & Nyepel. There are codes that we must comply with. We will comply with these. This is good soil. When you machinate it and work it in with the shale, it becomes a very stable building material. When we place the soil, excess soil on the Ohio University site, we will place it in what I call engineered lifts. We'll have a soil engineer which will be on site to monitor the placement of the soils. When we leave the soil, we'll seed it and we'll create it so that it grows into a mowable condition. So aesthetically, it will be something that's acceptable as well. We have done storm sewer engineering. We have detention ponds that are designed on the site now that will maintain the water in a condition that is better than the existing condition. The existing site has runoff, it has erosion, goes down. We will, when we build the site, we'll contain all of our water on site. Will be detained according to 100-year flood rules. We'll go through an approval process with the Ohio EPA, which is, by the way, standard. And the runoff that we have will be more suitable than what we have in the condition now. The streams that we have on the front and the back of the site, we have created buffers. We've presented some setbacks along those areas and tried to have a site plan that has respect for what I'll call the riparian corridors. I'm bouncing around here a little bit. We do have an access down to Dairy Lane. This will be for emergency access only. It's considered a secondary access. I mentioned previously that the your local emergency service groups of, well, fire chief has requested this, and so we now have it as part of our project. Previously, there was a plan that called and that this would be gated, lockable, and not for day-to-day use and for emergency use only. The university has requested that they have a secondary access also. They have 323 acres next door to us. We think it's a good plan, as in land planning, that they have this, even though they are going to pursue other primary access points for their property. We intend to cooperate with them and with you. Economically, you have a site now that generates about $1,000 a year in real estate taxes, and when we develop this, we'll be paying in excess of $600,000 in real estate taxes. We think this is a good deal for you folks. It's part of our obligation. We think it will be something that the city can use for your projects, and in addition to the things that we have stated here in our development agreement, we think that we're and have attempted to come forth to try and work with you folks to provide a project that is cooperative and as beneficial as it can be in the process. I might also mention that the site is zoned R3. We think that the project that we have here, which is 258 units, it's 882 beds, but the R3 zoning will allow us to put on 1,125 units, which if we build it the way we would, that'd be 3,000 beds. That's not what we're going to do. That's not what we've asked to do, but we think that what we have here is a compromise that is worth pursuing for you folks. We are intending to build this for student housing, which means we have a timeline. We want to open this so that we can be open in the fall of 2008. That requires us to build this in 15 or 16 months, which means that we want to get started with this very early next year. And those are some of the general questions, some of them specific, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or any discussion points that you may have.
Okay, the development agreement looks pretty much the same as the draft that you presented to us when you were here previously.
Yes.
And I have a couple things there, and then want to open that up to other members of council first and then to the community. First of all, in section C1, you say that the agreement will be binding once the PUD is approved by the Planning Commission and Council. So I think my first question is, what benefit you see in entering into a development agreement now, and why you want to pursue that at this time if it doesn't come into effect until the PUD is approved? I'm just trying to sort out the process we're going through here.
I think that quite generally it's that we're trying to come forth and share our ideas with you to get feedback so that we can have something that's got some give and take between all of us, and hopefully have a document that will be suitable, that where we can have some sense of fairness in terms of our compromise and yours as well. So that's the idea.
That's more just to get some of this stuff worked out ahead of time, but
Yes.
There's a point in here in section A that talks about emergency maintenance and construction of the water system, that work wouldn't begin until everything's approved except for those two things in A2. So
Yes.
some things, it looks like might you visualize starting the activity before the PUD is approved, or? I'm curious about the
No.
water line and,
No,
Okay.
we won't begin anything until we have approvals.
okay,
And there are a series of approvals, not only from your body, but we also have submissions that will be required by, for the civil engineering documents. We have to review with Burgess and Nyepel, your consultant. We have to have sign-offs on those documents, which will include sanitary, storm, water, erosion control. We have to have EPA permits. We will have some review process with probably the Army Corps of Engineer regarding the Coach Run.
right.
There's an extensive amount of submissions and processes that we go through, all of which need to be signed off upon before we begin the process.
Okay. Maybe I didn't understand the wording of that. And the last thing, we talked about this a little bit last week, and I've heard some people kind of commenting on this particular part of the development agreement that refers to the developer's relationship with Ohio University. And I think that I would be a lot more comfortable if we're talking about a development agreement, if it details the relationship between the developer and the city, and that the relationship between the developer and Ohio University be spelled out separately. And not in, because it doesn't seem related to me, to the agreement that we're working on.
Yes, I hear you. And maybe my wording needs to be amended here, but in fact, we will have a development agreement with Ohio University, and we will have one with the city of Athens. This is just my attempt to be open and, if you will, open about what's going on with your neighbors. I mean, Ohio University is its own entity, and you folks have your own opinions about that. We're going to we want to lay it out here and say, this is what we're doing, so that everyone's aware.
Okay.
Doesn't mean everyone will agree, but we're going to throw it out here and try and get to some compromise.
Also, I think from the administration's perspective is that we don't really want a bunch of dirt hauling on Richland Avenue, Dairy Lane, or upset Route 682. There are only a few adjacent properties. Only one of them is devoid of buildings. So it's, how can they promise we won't use your roads unless there is an agreement with the adjoining property owner? It's just recognizing reality.
So, other folks on council? Amy?
I just have a simple question, since it's concerning student housing. How much are you hoping to charge students for renting from you?
Right now, our rents are equal to the courtyard across the street. So 500 and some bucks for a 4-bedroom
Per person?
per person. The intention is to have, and they're designed for single occupant per bedroom, fully furnished. Everyone has their own bathroom, everyone has their own closet, kitchen.
Shared use of the kitchen.
That's
Shared
all.
kitchen,
Just-
unless you have a 1-bedroom, we'll have some of those, but primarily 3 and 4-bedroom units, yes.
I was just curious how expensive it was going to be.
Other members of council? Questions or comments? Paul?
So you're going to have less than 1 car per bedroom, I see.
Yes. That's what we're asking for. We'll intend, I don't have it spelled out tonight, but we'll phase this. And we'll have it'll be substantially weighted. We'll have a large number of bedrooms in the first phase. We'll build a community facility, which will be very nice. The idea when we develop community facilities is that we create a facility that allows our residents to stay on site, use our private facilities if they choose to, and be part of a community, which is something that creates a healthy environment for the people living there, and we call it a community. We intend to do that, and we've been successful in the past at creating those kinds of environments.
Previous incarnations of this had the driveway going to the site was usually too steep. What's the slope on this?
This meets the city code, which is
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yep, which is a 12% grade. The turning radius on this road down to Richland Avenue, which I'm going to call our front door, is a little more softer than the project across the street. I'll say that in the discussion here, had lots of comments about the courtyard, some mixed messages not mixed messages, actually some concerns about how it was developed. We've heard that. I've repeatedly told our team that we want to be sensitive to those kinds of comments and see if we can't do better. The projects we've built in Columbus, some people have seen, we're big believers in having a friendly streetscape. It's not only good for our project, it's good for the community, so that when folks drive by, they can drive by and say, those folks did a nice job. They maintain their landscaping, they engineered the site properly, they have nice signage. It's a nice place to drive by.
And I see part of the section, I guess it's 14, page 14, you're talking about 320 cubic yards of dirt,
Yes,
and 90,000 of it's going to stay on site.
correct.
And the map in Exhibit B shows where the other 230 are going to end up. Is that what I'm looking at?
Let me get,
Exhibit B is a couple pages behind 14, I think. Oh, it's part of your map system. Fold-out map.
pardon me, I'm a little slower than you are.
That's right there, I think you're looking at.
Yes, okay. The existing, yes, that's generic, but although this is an engineered document, what this Exhibit B does is it acknowledges the existing stream in that crosshatch section. We put this on here because a previous concept had fill in the stream area, which we didn't think was a good thing. And so the fill placement will be in that front section of the Ohio University property.
Okay, so that's the square just, I guess, let's see, looking at the map, probably south of what your development is?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a future road, that's where the water pipe's gonna go, I guess? I think, looking at one of your other exhibits.
It is.
Okay.
This is.
Exhibit A. shows
Yes.
that.
This is our interpretation of, from input with your own engineers, back and forth discussion with your city services directors. And this roadway, this water line alignment is, mirrors a long-term view that the city has expressed to us about what could happen in roadway infrastructure in this corridor.
Okay.
So we're attempting to lay the first brick in the pursuit of this plan that you folks might want to pursue.
Okay, thanks.
Carol?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions of things that aren't mentioned. The fill area, is that the location of the Indian Mound?
No?
Can you tell me where it is on that map?
There are two.
Right?
It's actually, they're in a cut area. see if I can describe this. Not really sure how to describe it visually or verbally. It's in the center of our, really what our clubhouse area is. Pardon me, I'm sort of fumbling through here to see if I can have a reference without pointing. Our clubhouse is the sort of freestanding building. I'm gonna have to point to something. Chris, we have a site plan. The Indian mounds are up in this area. So the fill area is over here,
Right.
over here adjacent. But they're in this area here. One of them is has already been excavated, and the existing condition
Right, I
is
know that.
was never repaired. The other is there's a tree, large tree over it, and we offered in past discussions and be happy to involved in some remediation effort or rebuilding or there are all sorts of ideas that we could pursue.
Be a little hard to rebuild it if it has a building on top of it.
Well, we do it somewhere else. Rebuild it on site somewhere else. Right now, it's not, you can't view it from, the community won't view it. So if we want to honor that in some way, we would rebuild it in some area, part of our entry feature or on the site side. We're open to discussion there.
My second question has to do with from Richland Avenue, the trees along the side of the hill, will they all be taken out?
This buffer area here, which is much of the vegetation, we will maintain that. There is sort of an open space here that goes by the bridge.
Right.
That's, we will rebuild that area. We're going to build a bridge, a crossing here. So this will be cleared in here and roadway will be installed.
So mostly for the roadway rather than just,
Pardon me?
mostly for the roadway rather than just general clearing?
Correct.
Okay, and the third thing that I wanted to mention is there's, the existing homes are not addressed in the agreement, and I can see them here on the map, on one of them. On the proposed fill map, you can see the houses. And I am curious as to what the status is in terms of mitigating the impact on the neighbors.
We will maintain a buffer along the property lines here.
Okay.
There's relatively little grading that's going on next to the property here. Our intention, met with several folks. I think there's some further discussion that will be required between us and them. But plantings, fencing, those kinds of things, that would be something we would do so that their view on their backyard is maintained in our front yard.
I see the property line goes pretty close to two of the houses. The others aren't quite so impacted.
Correct.
That's all of my questions.
Other council members?
Just kind of a general question. The proposed water line isn't following the track I thought it would. I guess I always assumed it would follow the road and come around that way. So we're cutting across this property here, and in the agreement it says we would provide easements through that property. How difficult is it to develop easements through private property? I don't know.
Well, we would have to, we have two options here. Well, the preferred option is if we have obtain an existing roadway to come in through that way, because then that would allow potential of future development on that roadway.
So
But if we do not obtain that, then we would have to go on down Blackburn and up Elliotsville Road, which is more costly, but we already have the right-of-way. And I think the documents do say in there that it was the path of the water line has not been determined. That is still yet to be, because we recognize we don't own all of the property. But I have talked to both property owners about the potential of easements, and they are open to that.
Seeing no other folks on council wanting to comment, other people here from the community who would like to speak to us about this development agreement. Muriel?
Muriel Grimm, 24 Canterbury, just wanting to know about responsibility and previous demonstration of maintaining agreements, in that when I last checked in October, there was still mud flowing off during rains across Dairy Lane. I don't know who's responsible for the property now, but that doesn't seem like very good maintenance of what your agreement should be with the city.
Greg?
I just wanted to ask a question, if I may.
Come up to one of the mics.
I'm going to address my question to the representative from the Edwards Communities. Yeah. First of all, with a little background in, I've had an education and experience in planning, I can appreciate your forthrightness, and, you know, I'm impressed in this forum, so. I just wanted to ask you if there would be a copy of this proposal available to the community at the library. If you can. I'm not saying you know today, but.
This will all be a public document.
Yeah.
So we present it to to your community, and there for your review if you like.
Okay, that's just a question I have.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And when plans of a project like this come to council, we have started pretty regularly making sure there's a copy of the plans at the public library, because that's a place that's convenient for people to review them. So we generally have been doing that.
Oh, very good. Thanks.
With these public documents. Anyone else wish to speak to us about this evening? I know that Mr. Kirk was here and met with a lot of people one-on-one, so hopefully answered a lot of questions that way. Where do people want to go with this at this point? Are there things in the development agreement that you need to, are there any changes you want to talk to the administration about? Does the development agreement look acceptable the way it is? I still have some question about the university being in the city and developer agreement, but what do other people think?
There's been no comment about the issue of conflict of interest, but I won't vote for it if the university part is in it. I think it's only prudent management of my existence to do that. I didn't say I'd excuse myself, I said I'd vote no. I won't excuse myself until I'm told to.
And we'll hear something, but probably not in February or March maybe, from the Ethics Commission.
Well, there's no reason to
Looks
have
like.
it.
Right.
Unless they don't want me to vote.
Anyone else?
The question, it says that we'll reimburse the developer for the water line work with forgiveness of tap fees up to whatever point that takes us, and then repayment from the TIF funds when funds are available. And I assume that there's language in there that will be developed at such and such a rate, not one lump sum
Right.
when that comes available.
We still have to determine what the estimate of costs will be. The water line and sewer line extensions within their own project are their expense.
Right.
It's only getting to the property. And that's where we've qualified it from the standpoint of we want the developer to upfront those costs. That if they then, if they're building, then we can give some credits of tax fee, of tap fees. And then if we're successful in having a TIF agreement with the city school system, then that would be, once those funds are start being paid, i.e. property taxes are being paid by the developer, then we could reimburse the balance of that, and we could, once we know what the budget for that is, and other expenses that we might have within the area to improve infrastructure, we could say if that's over a 3-year period or a 5-year period or whatever, we can do.
So that language would be included in a TIF?
I would think it would be in the TIF agreement because I think it's more appropriate there. But we reference it here so that you're aware of it.
Okay, thank you.
Have you had any discussions with the school district about this?
No. Just in general, I mean, told them that council's discussing this agreement, that I might have one coming forward to them once we work out more details.
I've got one person saying that clearly not wanting the OU language in there. Do other folks have perspective on that you'd like to share? Carol?
My only comment on that is taking out the language doesn't take out the reality. If they're going to deposit the dirt on OU land, it makes no difference to me, which way the language is. If that's what it is, that's what it is.
That's true, it's just not in there in the book.
Right.
Right.
I guess I'm in the same position that Carol is, because that language doesn't affect me, and we know what's going to happen, so it doesn't bother me, but if it will influence the potential of a vote for a council member, then maybe it should be stricken and just say that Phil will not go on the roadways.
Would the mayor and the developer be willing to talk that over and
I
try
would
to?
just say adjacent property, I mean,
Yeah.
property owner, and that's about all we can really say, because that way it keeps it off the roads and streets of the city.
That's fine.
Well, it isn't our problem anyway.
Right, that's,
Be happy to make that change.
okay.
It's
Or
not
just
really
trying
our
to be
problem in a certain
specific.
sense. I'd like to see, before I see the final agreement, how much the estimate is. 12-inch water line over the distance of 12 inches, which is roughly the edge of the paper, the best-case scenario. If I had a,
There's a section in here about the length of,
and how much roughly is it going to be? I didn't find it then.
oh,
I heard 750,000, that seems a little less, a little low.
there you go.
How much does
Oh,
it
the
say?
price you mean?
Yeah, the price.
There's no price. Well, there might be in here. I think I saw.
I mean,
a
for
price.
this best-case
640
scenario,
or
what's the
something.
price? And while people are looking, this university's composting area is right behind Catherine Shagnot, where it starts going across university land. That's the old university compost facility. If you look at map number,
Yeah.
Exhibit A. Yeah, no, it's not going up there. That's where they have windrows and a pad.
Right now, you mean?
Right now, yes.
Do you have a cost estimate on that?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can tell you, not right at the second, but I could tell you tomorrow that it's 6,000 some feet, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I don't have it in here, but we have it pretty tight. So, and I'll say that would be specified in the TIF agreement, that there's this cost, there's going to be a residual amount, and the tax revenue generation that we have would go to pay for that. So I'll be happy to get that for you.
So if it exceeds because of whatever, because it's a xeric slope or whatever, then who's responsible for the excess over your initial estimates?
We pay for it.
No matter
upfront,
what?
Period.
Yeah, I
And
mean, we're
that's-
going to word it in such a way that the actual expense is there and is upfront and advanced by the developer, so that there's no interest cost or anything to us. He has a way of recouping that, in essence, from the TIF and from the tap fees rather than from increased rents to its occupants. I mean, he's going to get it back one way or the other.
But the tap fees are only water tap fees, right? Because why would the sewer fund pay for the water line?
Right.
Right.
It's
And-
not,
Yeah, so,
right.
There is reference to access to the sewer system without any mention of the tap fees, and I don't know.
No, there obviously has to be a sewer line developed through this entire project area. At this time, that's all we've talked about is how they have said that they would make it of such a size that if we wanted to then hook into it, we could. But at that point in time, all we're talking about is, do you build an 8-inch line or do you build a 12-inch line from a sewer standpoint, so that really the costs of construction are only material related, and we didn't think it was substantial enough, at least that's my negotiating position, to have it
That's
that
correct.
way. Not especially not tied to tap fee.
so we're not relieving him of the obligation of paying sewer tap fees, only water tap, is that correct? Then?
That's what our proposal right now is, I mean.
Well, I mean,
Yes.
that's
We
going to
could
be,
go.
that's going to be in the development agreement, right?
But see, in my way of thinking, Nancy, the way I want to structure the TIF agreement is that from the developer's perspective, he can get money faster from the tap fees of water than from the TIF, because that occurs after the project is built and in the normal course of events of paying property taxes. But that does not mean the city can't get reimbursed the water tap fees from the TIF and put it back into the water fund. It's just a timing issue that I'm willing to give up for 2 years, say, a difference in time to make the economics of it work better for both of us. But I'm still going to say the water fund's going to get the tap fees. It'll just come from the TIF rather than from the developer.
And this-
Anything that had been waived for the developer.
And the city only has one current TIF, and that was approved before I was on council. All of this detail will come back to us
Oh,
when
yeah.
we're at that point. So this isn't like the authority to go do all this. We,
But
No,
if we-
no.
this locks it in,
Because
though,
what the TIF is it is an agreement between the city school system and the city of Athens, and in that we spell out what the TIF area is, what the projects will be, because the projects are infrastructure related or And we can do, as we did on East State Street, some degree of landscaping, et cetera. But our idea is first we get that road, water, and sewer line. Then, in future years, we also need to upgrade stormwater drainage on Richland Avenue. We need to upgrade water lines. We'd like to upsize that water line that's on there. We may, because of, I'd like to go and have, instead of 3 11-foot lanes, I'd like to be able to see us have 12-foot lanes on there. I'd like to do some re-sidewalking curb work.
You're talking about 6, 7, 8 years down the road, right?
Oh, sure, because a TIF lasts 30 years.
Right.
But we would want to overall improve the infrastructure of that corridor, just as we're trying to do with East State Street. We just haven't paid off the $7 million we paid for it yet. It was a lot bigger project than that.
If you acknowledge the TIF in this, that means that the TIF is going to be pretty much circumscribed or limited or outlined by the development agreement, is that correct? I mean, it won't go beyond it?
No, I think it would go beyond the development agreement because
just
the
says
TIF is really creating an improvement to infrastructure that will benefit the Richland Avenue corridor, which is primarily Richland Avenue, but also the tie-ins to that. Because if you put 800 and some bedrooms here, and if there's any other future development, businesses and such that are located on Richland Avenue, or to attract others to that, you want to improve your infrastructure, because we know that the water and the sewer in this area of town is some of the oldest that we have. We inherited much of it from when we annexed in the 1950s Mechanicsburg. It's, I think, the only siphon chamber in the city is located on Richland Avenue.
And it works pretty well according to the report we got last
And
time.
it does.
And compared to
But
some
that was
others.
because we went back in and spent $150,000 about 4 years ago rehabbing it.
Which is minor compared to
Oh, I
what
know, but that's what I'm saying. Where's the money come to rehab those utility services that are there?
So there's
Because some of
a,
the significant I&I problems are on Richland Avenue. You can see that from the water data. If it rained, we go up a couple $1 million or gallons per day of flow to the sewer plant.
well, you're speaking to the choir on that one. Okay, so just before, Paul's probably just dying to talk, but I've got to ask one more
No, go
question.
ahead. Take your time.
No, I don't know if what about people who wonder about the slippery slope of using a TIF for student housing? You know, to benefit the largest non-tax-paying entity in the town. I mean, there's a punch in the stomach type of question for you, but I mean, that's the type of stuff that people ask in this town.
Well, but there isn't too much of a benefit for that. I mean, all we're doing is the water. And the water there to do that is, okay, we could supply this development with water from Richland Avenue. It would require a pump station, just like you have at Carriage Hill, just like we have at University Courtyard. But what we have overall as a community in this area is Blackburn Tower sitting out there with its capacity that doesn't turn over in the recommended 48 hours that EPA would like to see it. It needs more customers. All right, with the gravity feed from Blackburn Road and looping back down in here and going back to Richland, the engineers tell us we can eliminate the Carriage Hill pump station and the University Courtyard pump station, thereby saving us probably $12,000 a year in electrical bills.
And only going up.
And give us backup pumps and everything else.
But
So
I
that
agree.
water line's for our benefit. The developer could probably spend, what, $100,000 and put a pump station at the bottom of the hill?
That's right.
And do it, otherwise, but instead he's probably gonna spend $600,000. And the differences in that is, yeah, we're gonna reimburse him that cost through the TIF.
But
Because of the other benefits the city receives.
but we're back with the taxpayers. I mean, you know, the income taxpayers are going to be paying now for schools, and I guess that's another part of the question. The property tax part will be a smaller portion, so will that affect this?
Yeah, it takes longer to pay for those things.
Okay, so but, you know, again, we're back with that slippery slope of the TIF for student housing, and I don't know, I've heard, people have asked me that question. And
Well, whether it's student housing or elderly housing, right now TIFs are available for commercial enterprises and for multifamily housing. In this case, it's student housing, but let me just state, that we have more student renters in town than anybody else.
I have no problem with good housing for students. I just wanted to state
Good
that.
fire protection is good.
And maybe this is something that I could get some information for all members of council, because most of us on here haven't dealt directly with the creation of a TIF. So I'll just try to get some background information to people so that we can dig into this a little bit before we have to consider it. Paul?
I guess two questions. B3, it says, assist the city's development agreement stuff. To assist coordination of acquisition of all necessary easements from ODOT. What section of ODOT are we talking about? Why is ODOT in there? Page 11 on your handout. Top bullet.
All right, that was originally put in because one of the options that we were looking at the beginning of this was, instead of running the water line up Blackburn Road and over through, was to run it in front of Kimes and over to the project area. It would still work gravity feed-wise, but it was using ODOT right-of-way. I've asked for the other thing, and I think we need to probably
I need to amend
take
that.
ODOT out of there
Yes.
if we can get the other one done. 'Cause there's three ways we could do this project. One's down Blackburn and up Elliotsville Road to Dairy Lane. The other is through ODOT right-of-way in front of Kimes and US Route 5032 as it goes through the city.
Okay. The other question I have is very similar to Nancy, in terms of employee of the university. What's in it for the university, and what's in it for us for giving the university any benefit?
Well, I don't know if I can answer all your questions. I don't know your employment status and your agreements with.
I'm on a presidential contract. They just write me a little letter saying, can I be jumping into
I
you?
can only answer to some of the things of what I think might be beneficial to the university in my discussions with them, and Mr. Kirk can add to that if he wishes. As Nancy and others have said in the past, there is a composting facility that the university has here. There is a desire on the university's part to put a lot of their nursery functions there. They have 322 acres of land that the nearest water line is a 6-inch that's going down Blackburn Road. There is no sewer service to that 322 acres. So it raises the potential from the university standpoint of how, because that's one of the community concerns that I hear is, where's the land of the university? Where are they going to expand in the future? Where are they going to put anything? And what we're saying, if we can get this roadway with water and sewer, some portion of that 322 acres is potentially available to the university to do primarily ancillary services or maybe even potentially housing, et cetera. That's up to them. What I'm saying as a community leader is that here is an opportunity for us to develop roadway, water, and sewer, and stormwater through an area of the community that has already had, questions raised to it on a couple of issues. One is, with the campus of the university and the services they offer. The other is, we've been getting, as a community, 4,400 students the last couple of years or thereabouts. They've got an 81% retention rate. I'd hate to think what an 85 would do to our housing stock. If they are continuing along that course, and I've got people at the state legislature and in state government that are saying education, especially higher education, is the key to the economic future of Ohio. Okay, we're one of the main universities in Ohio. Does that mean they're going to be bringing more students here? Where are we going to house them? And so where is the vacant land? I don't want more houses converted. So if we can create some areas where student housing can be created, then they, as the demand is there, and that we're creating the land to do it on.
Another question. I'm looking at this Exhibit A, and you just mentioned a 6-inch line. Now, where's the 6-inch line on Blackburn versus the 10-inch line that's referred here? Are they two
Well,
different
there's a
lines?
10-inch line that goes on up Blackburn to about the crest. If you recall, you were in the audience in those days.
You expanded it.
We expanded and upsized, I think it was a 6 or an 8 that we put in, but there's a 10 that goes up a certain amount of distance there. The engineers tell me that can still supply what's going on out Blackburn Road in addition to the 10-inch over here.
But that's going to be linked to a 12-inch subsequent. If I'm reading the page 13 here, it says you're
Yeah.
going to get a 12-inch line. So you're going to go from a 10-inch line to a 12-inch. Is that right?
That's what the proposal
Okay.
says.
And the other line is somewhere further down, going towards Dairy Lane, I assume? The 6-inch you just referenced, or is that something different?
Dairy Lane?
Didn't you just mention
That was
6
one of
inch?
the options, yes. You could, if you created an entire loop going down Elliotsville and coming back into Dairy Lane to get to the same property, it's more expensive because there's more feet involved with it, but you also, again, look at potentiality of is do you increase it? Part of the problem there is some of that area is served by the city and some of that area is served by LEAX. So we might just be running concurrent lines part of the way.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to see if we can resolve the issue with the language about Ohio University, and I think I'm hearing that this could be up for first reading. A lot of questions still, but
Can we have one copy in council?
and we
Yeah.
keep one copy of this in the council office.
We'll,
Just remember, we'll be making changes.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll write all over it, draft,
Say draft.
okay?
okay.
We may help you find some identified changes to make.
Yeah.
When can we expect it for first reading?
Are we meeting next week?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
So-
Only if you want a budget next year.
Yeah, so,
First reading. First reading next week.
if we don't work this stuff out, we'll talk again, but it seems like it's possible.
Is there a lot of reason to have first reading next week if we're not going, won't we really need to start it all again?
We,
Oh, no, it's
we
not a-
continue. It's
not
not
a-
a
We
continuing.
continue, we don't drop everything. I should be able to tell you that.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. President.
I've never done this
You're
before.
going to keep one?
Had a brand-
One in the library?
Yes.
I guess
No,
not. Maybe
in
not in the
council
library.
office.
Council office, okay.
Council office.
And next up is Mr. Kincaid to talk about the Carroll Road minor lot split. If you want to come on up to one of the microphones and begin letting folks, council members should have a memo from the planning commission
Okay.
and a letter from Patrick McGee.
Have a good trip.
And a field trip experience.
Yes, delightful.
Thank you, sir.
We always make mistakes.
Thanks. I'll pass it down. Okay.
Way too many
There you go.
Okay, so do people have these?
What were the planning commission?
There's a planning commission memo that you received a while back because we had to pull this off of the agenda a couple times. And then there's a letter that we received from Patrick McGee today
There's a package you just got too, right?
and a packet that we just received.
Yeah.
Does everybody have the stuff you need? Okay. Mr. Kincaid, if you want to
Yes, I'm
describe the
just,
situation to us?
just requesting that the council grant this variance for a minor lot split as recommended unanimously by the City Planning Commission. I think you have all the papers there. Just 2 or 3 comments. I have 2.3 acres, and I'd like to split that into 2 lots of, probably around an acre, a little over an acre in size each. Talking with the code office, after having done that, if that goes through, we will have met all, we can still meet setbacks, width to depth ratios, and any of the other lot issues that are in the code. Again, the 2 remnant lots will still be about an acre or more in size. Most of the lots in town are far smaller than that. I think there was possibly some concern about visual. I might add that I have background in urban and community forestry, land use planning. I have a master's degree in that, and personally, if I was to get the lot split and build another house there, I would myself want to screen, other houses, including the one I currently live in, with landscaping and tree plantings and that type of thing. I'm sensitive to that. In fact, I've worked closely with Ann Bonner and different people like that as a federal employee as well as now a state employee on those kinds of issues. It seems to me to be a relatively minor thing, particularly listening to some of the previous conversation in the University Estates and some of that kind of stuff. I hate to even bring a small thing like this in front of you in a way, but it seems to be a property rights issue to me. I'm assured by both the mayor's office and the code office that there won't be any problem with setbacks or distances from boundary lines, that type of thing. I just would pledge to you that I will do everything that I could do to minimize any impacts. Mostly they would be visual, I think, whether those impacts are perceived or real. I would work to minimize those. And if the mayor wanted to add anything there, I know he maybe could help me explain some of this a little better. He was present at the Planning Commission meetings.
Right.
But that's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah, Mr. Kincaid just had asked me to explain some of the thinking of the Planning Commission on this. One is when you look at the plat of the survey and envision Carroll Road there, primarily off to the left in that general area from where Mr. Kincaid's property is, a lot of it was the old house trailer park owned by the Brookses, which was, we had the roadway between there and on Carroll Road, and that was the only part that was actually in the city because we didn't want the trailers in the city. Well, after that was sold off and everything was abandoned, there were a series of segments of the subdivision areas that happened, and a number of different houses got built. And I think Carroll Road still goes pretty well straight there at the bottom here, if I recall, Mr. Kincaid, and I think there's another house in through here, isn't there?
There's one right in front of
Yeah,
us.
so we have a house, this lot was sort of created with a minimum width that goes back through and then creates this nearly 2-acre parcel, of which one house currently is. Our concern was if the property owner wants to utilize their land more efficiently, we did not want to create 2 driveways in that narrow corridor of property going back. So we determined that, or requested of him to write a permanent easement for egress that would be 30-foot wide, joint maintenance agreements, et cetera, as long as they were together, so that we would not increase the number of driveways on Carroll Road. Can't really look at it as 2 houses as to how many vehicles, because you could have empty nesters in one and the other has 5 teenage boys. You just don't know, and when you create 2 houses as to what you're going to have at any point in time. But we wanted to maintain one access point. And knowing the general lay of some of the houses in through there and previous actions by the Planning Commission in that area, we felt it was appropriate use of property.
You see what's going to be reduced.
The
Joint property.
Yes, it would be recorded with both property deeds and maintenance agreement and easement restriction.
Yeah, Debbie, I might just, add upon what the mayor said. I mean, it would be another house there if, my intent would be to put another house in there. The initial thinking on the lot split for me was to possibly do that for my parents. They're elderly and they live in Columbus. But, you know, however that works out, that was my initial thinking anyway. And it would put another house in there, and of course I can pay property taxes and help pay off that 30-year East State Street bill.
Good.
There's still owe a lot of money on
Please.
that. Even though I'm paying a lot towards that. But there is a house that was built just within the last 6 months right in front of me. I mean, directly in front of me.
Does it have road frontage, the one in front of you?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, but it's right in front of my house.
I thought maybe it was like this one. That's why I was wondering if there was another
No,
one like it
no,
somewhere.
It does. It's a small lot. It's, I think, only a third of an acre, but it's right in front of me.
It's not unusual in the city to have a third of an acre, I don't think.
No, it's not, even less, from what Steve Pearson told me. Right across the street from that, there's a lot where a house is going to be built. There was another house built there beside that one. 2 doors down was another new house, all built within the last 6, 8 months. Up on Old Coach, 1 block from where I live, there's 5 houses have gone in there in the last 3 years, essentially where there was woods. So as far as the visual of another house being built, when you build a house that wasn't there, you see that house.
Yeah, I don't think that visual is the only issue we're talking about here. We're talking about creating a lot that doesn't have road frontage, and we're talking about the kind of flagpole lot shape that I think planners generally try to avoid, in addition to the fact that, I mean, it looks like this driveway would be immediately adjacent to the other property owner's house. I mean, I think there are a number of planning issues here and not just visual issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of them.
And we could add to that the fact that many of us live in similar environments, and we hope against hope that the people that live by us don't plan to do the same thing. I mean, the gully by my house could become someone's house if this starts to be something that people do as a regular matter, where we have the people along the top owning certain amounts, and then the gully could be the place where the next house goes. So frankly, I've heard comments about the one other place, I believe was Glenn Knutson built in Lamar, from people, and they said, that's a mess, don't ever do that again. So you don't have my vote.
Yeah, there's one there, the one you mentioned. There's another one down on Mulligan.
That's the one. We don't want to do any, I don't want to do any more.
That's the second one. There's one on 6 Canterbury.
Yeah, each one of
Talking to
them.
the residents there, which I did, not a problem.
That's not what I hear, sir, sorry.
Well, no, this is a different one than what you were mentioning.
5195, we granted a variance initially for this. So it's not like, and that was 10 years ago.
For the
or 11 years
creation
ago.
of
For
this
the
lot.
creation of the addition of the lot, as it was.
At 6 Canterbury.
No, yours.
Your property,
Oh,
95.
95, 5195. Howard Stevens sponsored it, May 1st, 1995.
And we do have a letter here on behalf of the property owner of the adjacent property. If people got a chance to look at that and the issues that are raised.
And we did take a road trip out there 2 months ago, I think it was,
Yeah.
to look at this site.
Okay. Council members have other questions or comments? Paul,
As it stands now, I wouldn't vote for this.
I'm sorry,
questions or
I didn't
comments?
hear what he said.
Doesn't support it.
Oh, you raised the question in which I've been flipping back and forth. It looks as though the right-of-way is immediately adjacent to the existing house. And I'm wondering what that distance is between the proposed property line and the existing house.
Of the one that I live in now?
Yes.
It's 26 feet from the corner to my house. From
And the
property.
easement is 30 feet until it reaches that point.
That's the way Steve had drafted it out on that one proposal.
From this corner
Yes.
and the proposed driveway, what's the distance of the proposed driveway to the existing house?
It actually goes right almost to that point. There's a little kind of a circle turnaround right there.
And then you would take it straight back, so it would go immediately adjacent to the existing house?
Yeah, it about has to go through there because of where the property corner lays. I guess you
Carol?
could take it on the other side,
We
too.
seem to have some questions. Is this your house
Yes,
where the Smiths previously lived?
yes.
Okay, so you're talking that the access to this property back here would go next to that house and real close to the other.
It would stay on the existing driveway till it got to where that little circle is.
And then
Right.
split off. down.
Okay, I see.
So the
So-
fence is on whose property?
It's on mine.
And it would have to go?
No.
It'll fit between there?
Yeah, it would fit between there. The current
Very
driveway's 10 feet wide, I think. And there's 26 feet there. Yeah, the current
anyone-
driveway that exists from Carroll back to my house
Right.
is 10 feet in width.
We did go up there and look at it, and I have major trepidation about it.
Could put it on the other side of the house too, but it's really the same situation over there with the distance to the corner, property corner. It's an odd lot. I don't know how the lot ever got, if there's any poor planning, then it was probably back when they split
By
the
a
lot.
variance we granted.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no end to
I
it.
mean, I guess I could put the road on the other side, but it'd be the same,
Amy?
We've obviously heard from the adjacent property owner. Have you heard from anybody else up in that area?
I think there are some
there are
people
some
here to
people here.
speak to us tonight.
great.
And I was just going to say,
Good.
if you're here to speak to us about this, let me know. Okay, come on up to one of the microphones and let us know who you are. And where you live.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Cambridge, and I live at 291 Carroll Road. And although it may seem as though I'm 2 doors away, I am also an adjacent property owner because of the strange configuration of these lots. And I did bring a copy of, that I made for myself, of the plat map, because I wanted to see exactly where the properties were. So I just, unfortunately, I just have the one copy, but I did write in 10. That's, where are we?
Right there.
Yeah, that's mine, and that's the Yard property next door. That's his property. The thing is, I wish I could show everybody, our property is parallel with Carroll Road. So when you, I guess I need to go back to that.
If anybody can.
When you drive down Carroll Road, it would seem as though
pass this
you've
around.
got parallel lots because the houses look kind of parallel to one another. However, my lot is an odd-shaped lot as well. I have an acre, but it's actually at an angle to my house. So actually, from my house, when I look out into my backyard, I would be looking at this proposed development here. I want to preface what I'm saying by saying I am not opposed to new construction, so this is not a knee-jerk reaction here. As a matter of fact, I've been very pleased with all of the new construction on Carroll Road and Old Coach just around the corner, because I think they have added value to the properties of those of us who live there. But here we're talking about something that actually would take away value. We're talking about a situation where someone is asking permission to do something that would actually devalue my property. So first, we have a problem here. Yes, it's true that maybe, Mr. Kincaid has 2 acres or whatever. But when I bought that property, it was outlined a certain way. And yes, I knew I would have neighbors next door to me, and I'm very happy to have those neighbors. But I also had an expectation, based on the configuration of the property lines, that I would have green space behind me. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the things that everybody comments on who comes to that property, the fact that there is privacy at the back. So we're within the city, we're in a neighborhood, we have neighbors, but we have privacy, we have green space. And so that's the first issue here. it's a very steep slope, so any kind of development, to put any kind of building there would require a lot of, I'm not an engineer, I don't know how this stuff works, but obviously a lot would have to be done with that land. There's a pond right there, so we're talking about a situation where my property could be impacted adversely in terms of any drainage or anything else with the development that's going on there. The three, I guess the four main concerns I have are the impact to the value of my property, the negative impact on the beauty of my property, negative impact on my privacy, and the negative impact on any drainage or anything else to do with my land. Mr. Kincaid referred to the new construction that he says is in front of him. That's probably, I guess, maybe 297. He hasn't been here long enough maybe to know that that house is actually replacing a house that was already on that lot. So it's not unusual for a house to be there. There was always a house there. As a matter of fact, I think it was the original house. It was the farmhouse for all that property there that we are on. It's also rather interesting that Mr. Kincaid was able to go as far as Canterbury to talk to people to find out how they were impacted by such strange construction in the past. He had to drive past or walk past his neighbors to do that, and never once, said anything to the people who would be directly affected. This is the first time I'm really seeing what Mr. Kincaid looks like. So with all of that said, I would hope that the council would vote against such construction. Thank you.
And I passed your plat map around if you need to get that back.
Oh, I don't need to get it back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone
figure
else
it out,
want to
tell me.
speak to us about this? Chris?
I got that.
Chris Nisley, 15 Old Coach Road. I do have concerns from a planning standpoint of the request to grant a variance and for a piece of property that would not have direct access to the road, and just don't think that that would be good planning for that area. Thank you.
Anyone else? Celia?
I'm Celia Rapp. I live on Longview Heights. This piece of property at the back of Mr. Kincaid's house, I can see from the back of my house. It's just woods and natural habitat. It's extensively deer hunted in that area. I was very much in shock when I heard that this was in a plan, because I thought, what a strange place for a house. So I decided, well, I can't just base it on not wanting to see that in the woods. So I drove over there. And as I drove down his driveway, I thought I'd be able to look in this backyard and see if it was appropriate or not to build a house there. And I thought, well, this must not be the property, because there's no place here to put a driveway, let alone be able to see this piece of property. And then I found out that indeed that was the plan, and I believe that if you allow him to build that, it would be very cluttery. It's sort of akin to areas out in the county that aren't zoned, and you have trailers or houses and right next door and little enclaves. So I don't think it's a good idea.
Greg?
Greg Broadhurst, Granville Avenue. Just as I'm listening intently to this discussion about this particular project, it occurs to me that this could be a precedent that would actually encourage the Athens version of mountaintop removal. You understand what I'm saying? And the biggest question is, are the watershed issues answered in regards to this application? I haven't walked it, I haven't walked the land myself, but it's a question that I believe needs to be answered, because what was spoken about in terms of the values that are impacted by such a project, there's some great issues having to do with, obviously, in this area that have to do with drainage and the nature of the soils in which that project would be built upon. So I think those questions need to be answered before anything goes forward. Thank you.
Well, fellow committee members, Jim and Nancy, do you want to bring this out of committee?
No.
Jim?
Jim's going to.
Well, yeah, yes, I think we should bring it out and vote on it. That's always my choice.
Amy?
I'm not on the committee, but that seems to be the appropriate thing to do. Let council either vote it up or down.
I'm not hearing much support for this, and it seems clearly
Waste of time.
not to be following any of the planning principles that we, I think, have been working to try to implement. I also, this is the first I heard of the pond, and I know there have been issues previously with swales for stormwater detention in that development that have been taken out when they were deed restricted to remain there, that have caused problems for adjacent property owners. So that raises even another issue.
I agree with you that I haven't heard, nor do I feel that there's much support on council to do this, but if something comes before us, I just feel that that it's a matter of resolution for us to vote on. But that's,
Well, you're probably right, because if you say, don't send us another one of these, and then a variance on a variance with no frontage, maybe the message will be pretty clear.
So you do want to go ahead and
No,
bring
I
it?
don't want to go ahead. I want to hear it again.
No,
I
she's-
don't want to, I figure we've got enough on our plates without, doing a losing battle, but, I'll go.
well, if the committee is
We could
2 to 1 not to bring it
we
out,
could just
then
bring it
that's,
out and vote on it next week. Suspension of the rules, get it over with.
so you're the swing vote.
Swing. Decide.
I think,
Keep in mind, we don't box things up in committee and take committee votes to get them out. Any member of council can bring anything forward that they wish to bring forward. We do committee structure just to try to work it through and give it the type of thing. But I agree with Member Bain. If we see, I'm not seeing one positive vote, if I'm reading the nods of the heads correctly. But, it's totally up to any member of council that wants to fight it through and bring it out.
okay.
But let's not make a mistake here. We've never worked under the assumption that 2 people on a committee can either box something up or allow it to come out. That's the only thing I wanted to make clear.
Okay.
Amy?
Well, then I guess can the record show that this council doesn't, not going to approve minor lot splits like this?
I think we got into some hot water when council did a straw poll vote once before.
Well, they
So,
used to do them all the time.
Well, then let's read the
and
ordinance.
And you're correct.
And we recently had someone come back to us and say, you had a planning commission recommendation that you did nothing with a couple years ago, and it just hung there, and it's in this strange limbo, so what's the status? So I guess I'm inclined to go along with Jim and say we should bring it out and vote on it and get it done.
Yes,
So
For that
We
simple
can
reason.
suspend next week and do it.
that's fine with me.
Suspend the rules.
Member Bain.
Now, that may be a first.
That
in
might be
many
a first
years'
indeed.
life.
I just think there's no
Not a
point
bad idea
in
either.
thrashing it around.
It may not fit the reasons we're supposed to suspend the rules, just to minimize our.
Well, just like the traffic parking one.
Okay, I have a lot of other things on the agenda here.
Oh, I can hardly wait for the
In my
next one.
miscellaneous items, so we should move on.
Okay.
We have folks here from University Estates to speak to us about some roads. You should have received some letters from University Estates. Lance Rep is here to
Keep it short.
talk to us about this, and we'll try to go through this fairly quickly.
My name is Lance Repp. And the purpose for tonight is, recently we went through the planning commission and our last planning commission meeting, and we needed to amend our original plat that was done in 2001, I think it was. And as a result of that, one of the roads on there, Altamont Terrace, after we got into it, found it wasn't safe to be built the way it was drawn on the plat. So we're relocating that. And then there were some other minor things that the Planning Commission asked us to look at and change. And then we have two roads that were not going to be built for quite a long time. Those are Greenview and Stone Ridge Court. So if I understand the procedure right from the Planning Commission meeting, before they can accept the amended plat that we have before them, and with some minor changes that they asked me to make, they're ready to do that, but they cannot do that while the original plat is still in the original shape that shows those several roads on there. So we're asking that those roads be vacated so that we can follow right in at the next Planning Commission meeting with the amended plat. We are the sole property owners around those three roads, so we don't need to go through any other procedure than bring it to council.
My understanding of the reason for this request is a little bit different than that. My understanding is that the Planning Commission wanted the bonds that are supposed to be in place for those roads to be in place before agreeing to plat amendments, and that the reason for requesting vacation was to not have to put those bonds in place now.
That's correct. That's just, for Stone Ridge and Greenview, and that's why I explained we're not prepared to build these, and they're way down the road. So there's no use putting them on a plat and bonding them for something that's probably 5 or 6 years down the road. The Altamont Drive issue was the road that is a safety concern that has to be moved. So, and
in fact is already partially constructed in a different location than where it's platted?
Right, but there's a bond with that.
Right.
Okay. So that part of that is a...
I think my main question for Mr. Holmes when we met was to find out from the mayor and or the fire chief about whether the road that connects down to Armitage Road was considered a secondary access, because I don't think the Planning Commission would have, or council would have approved a subdivision that had a long cul-de-sac without a secondary access. And so I think that road serves a public function. I think that's why it's on the map. So have you spoken with the fire chief or the mayor about that?
I've talked to the mayor, I haven't talked to the fire chief. That will still remain a gravel road, because that's the road we're using to come up over the hill with the heavy equipment, the concrete trucks and stuff. So the positioning of it will be gravel, so that, yes, there is access to it. But as far as developing that road, that was originally one of the last roads to be done anyways.
Mm-hmm. But I guess the point I'm trying to make with that is I think that when the subdivision was approved, the roads were part of what was approved. And I can't imagine that the Planning Commission would have recommended a big development with a long cul-de-sac. I think that there need to be two entrances, and that must have been important to the approval process. I asked the mayor if he'd be able to share his views on this, but he's not in the room at the moment. So if anybody else was around for that process and knows whether that's true or not, I'd appreciate the information. There is a map on the table in our office if people need to look at the location of the roads that we're talking about.
We're going to take time to do that.
Okay, Paul's gonna, will you bring the map in here?
bring the map.
Okay.
I'll grab it.
Let's take a
And
5-minute
bring the
break
mayor
until the
in
mayor
here.
gets back from his break.
Other folks have other questions. I think we can go ahead and address that while we're, so Paul.
I was under the impression there was a variance given for length of cul-de-sac. Is that the case?
Well, we'll have to go back and look. Do you know, Debbie?
No, no,
There were
Probably
variants
not in the,
given.
probably not in the phase that's currently platted. I think that in the future phases, there is a very long cul-de-sac.
So these phase 1 or phase 2 we're talking about right here?
This is the existing platted lots.
I believe Altamont there was a variance on it. The original Altamont
For what?
exceeding
The length?
length.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
Okay. Folks can look at the map if you need to, so.
Put it right in the center.
You want to show folks what's what on this map?
Okay, this is 682 out here. This is the original plat that was filed. We're not prepared to build this one at this time, or Greenview, way down the road.
This is the one that connects to Armitage.
Yeah.
Okay.
This
That I'm
is
referring
Altamont
to.
Terrace. It will be relocated up in here. It's unable to be built here safely.
And it was built in a different location. It's partially built.
It's partially built and moved over here. So in order to plat, you've got to take these off before you can file a new plat.
Okay, so this will extend the cul-de-sac. It will make this entire area a cul-de-sac.
Correct.
And
There won't be any public right-of-way into this other than University Estates Boulevard.
Altamont is changed because the engineering was faulty? I mean, the engineering wasn't done
Once
before
we
the
got,
map was platted?
this
Or
was done a long time ago, and once we got moving things, we felt that this wasn't appropriate to put this road in.
So this road's not going to happen.
We won't have it at this time, and
So
when
you-
it does, it probably won't be in that same.
So that would
configuration.
make no difference whatsoever.
But the roads are still in the plan.
Right.
And it doesn't seem to me like a normal planning practice to vacate roads that are intended to exist for a public purpose and then plan on replatting them later. I don't understand how that, well, not even moving them. The one has already been
Lance just
moved.
said this one will probably be moved as well.
Yeah, this one will be configured differently. This one will be fairly close to the same once we get to that point,
Which is when?
probably 5-6 years.
So this is kind of like a draft final plat, is that what we're seeing here?
No, I don't believe
So you're saying you're using
This is the
that.
original final plat.
The request to vacate road is really all of it. And,
But council is very hesitant even to vacate alleys that have never been improved. And to talk about vacating roads that you do in fact intend to use for a public purpose in the future, it just, the request seems very unusual, and I'm glad the mayor's back in the room. One of the questions that we just asked was whether the road from University Estates Boulevard down to Armitage Road was considered the secondary access to the project for fire and emergency vehicle access.
I think that it gives it that for, a large portion, assuming a tree's down or car accident or something like of that nature.
Yep.
But that road will still be a gravel road that is access for it'll be our construction road. So in terms of being able to get up and down that, you still can. It's the further improvement of it we don't plan to do for quite a while.
If it isn't a public right-of-way, would that be something the city considered an emergency access?
Yeah, we go on private roads all the time, I mean, in apartment complexes and other things to get to their areas. They're usually not gravel, but, I don't know. We'd have to find out if a fire truck could pull in a gravel condition.
The way this was just presented to us is that this has to happen before the amended plat can be filed. But it seems really unusual to me to talk about vacating roads that are intended to be used for public purpose in the future.
Yes.
So I want to hear your thoughts or recommendation on this.
It is unusual. I think that the developer is saying they are unable to come up with a road bond for all the platted roads that are in phase one of the project. So they only have a couple of options. I mean, one is this one that you try to vacate and probably come back if the development is successful and recreate it. The other is to deplat it, which is going through the Court of Common Pleas to deplat areas of a subdivision and put it back to raw land. Those are the two ways they can get around or get to the point of not being able to post the road bond, because it's pretty clear, even in the legislation you've got going through right now, that at the time of platting, you want, as the city code requires, bonds on all roads that have been platted. Because once you plat the whole plat, then those are all eligible for sale.
Well, council members?
So we're talking about eliminating roads, putting them back, and this is part of a final plat that's not final. The rationale I'm seeing here is because we want to save money on bonds, or the engineering was poor, so we have to move the road over, because we didn't do the engineering before we did the final plat.
Yes.
Am I summing up for my ward properly?
Yes.
Good.
What do you want to do with this, folks?
Don't ask
How do you go about
questions like that.
deplatting the place now?
You have to file in the Court of Common Pleas as a petition
I think we ought to put it on the agenda next.
by the property owners to platted property. The last time I believe that was done within the city was in a development called Rebel Hill, which was approved by council about 24 years ago.
I never heard of it, but that's okay.
Oh, I can show it to you.
It was
It
wonderful.
was off of Cable Lane.
But the property owner would pursue that if that's what they chose to do.
They could. Remember, 8 years ago, there was a platted piece, Briarwood is still platted on out past where it is right now. It
Phase
still
2.
remains that way. It has never been deplatted, but it's never been built either. So there has to be a way in law to be able to get something that at one time got platted, changed, back to its original state.
So there isn't adequate bond for the existing roads now?
No, there was no bond on this Greenview Road, and there's no bond on Rock something.
Stone Hill.
Stone Ridge, okay.
Okay.
When we
Stone Ridge.
replat the Altamont Drive, okay, that process will eventually tie into a new Stone Ridge that will be built in the future. So that configuration will change there. The Greenview part, the mayor's right, is a dollars and cents issue of not wanting to bond a road that's probably not going to be built for 5 or 6 years that, we're not building on anyways, so.
Question, what is the timetable for, if I remember the development agreement had a condition of 10 years or $750,000 tap fees. What is the clock on that 10 years? Did it stop during the lawsuits? Is it still going?
That's an unanswered question. I mean, the ordinance that passed said 10 years.
Okay.
It's never been modified by council.
2001, so we got plenty of time
Phase
for
one
that.
has no roads in it?
Oh, but it does. Good question.
Carol?
There are other roads out there. Where are they? I mean, they're houses.
There are
Oh,
roads
okay.
with houses on them.
And
The other
they've got
part is
not
roads
shown
to them.
The other part of that, where the single-family housing starts, there's no changes on the roads or anything on
So
that.
this is,
That's just the front section.
So it's on out there that the
Still phase
houses
one.
are? This is all before,
Okay.
this is that whole area up on top of the hill where you excavated?
this is going down.
Right here is where the houses start.
Okay.
That's not fair.
It's not fair.
So that map ends.
I think we ought to
So
run it through
this is
council
one
in 3
road.
readings,
This is the
see if we
green.
want to vacate those streets.
And this is one
It's
road.
like the last one.
Well, but this is
Well-
a recommendation from the planning commission that's gonna
Right.
like.
Who cares? I
hang
mean,
out there
same
and
thing.
land.
They were told this is a recommendation too. Let's just let them wait.
This all connected.
Come on, what the hell do we have subdivision regulations for? This is the way it's gonna work.
So this road's still there? No.
This is the new Altamont.
Okay.
We've had
So
people
that's the
come
one you
to
want
us.
to change.
We're just looking at a picture of the ones
So
that
you've
want.
already, right, you've already done
Right.
this.
Well, it's the plat. It's only a piece of the overall project, though.
Yeah, but that's,
That's like,
The highlighted ones are the ones they want vacated.
okay, I understand. The two that are going to be redesigned, relocated, I don't know. I don't think we should release the one going down the hill because we have already bad experiences with cul-de-sacs, whether they be long or short. And there needs to be a way to get access, not only emergency access, but access just for people in and out.
And I think we have recent experience with dealing with the slip on Sunset of how difficult it is to obtain a right-of-way if we don't have the right-of-way and people live there.
And so I think maybe either bond on that one remaining would encourage it to be completed sooner than the anticipation is now.
But we don't have a bond on it. at
No,
this
we don't have. a
If the bond were there.
If the bond- Right.
If there was a bond.
So
If I only had a.
And I guess for myself, Altamont, there's a road there that has been built and there's a bond on it. I'd like to see us have the right-of-way for that. I don't know about how it works in terms of the process in time with getting the road, the existing road platted versus vacating this one. If there's some, in terms of the sequence of events, it seems strange to me to vacate a road.
Blacktop Road is there?
There is a blacktop road there.
I haven't been up there.
Explained to me that there had to be a paper trail showing vacation of a road before a new one could be platted.
Well, it's, it's a timing issue. I mean, you're trying to, either through plat revision or through vacation by council, move where a road is. It's still named the same thing. It's serving, I think, the same original purpose. But engineering-wise, you moved it before you build it. But still, there has to, because right now, that road doesn't exist anywhere in law.
Right.
It's a private road.
So we're trying to solve some things.
Well, there are a number of issues to solve.
Well, right, but.
So
We have enough time.
what Mr. Rapp is just saying that his understanding is that first we need to approve this vacation and then soon
Well, then we know
after
what-
that, we would,
Once you vacate, if you're gonna vacate anything, that's where then, and then there's still going to be, would have to be a replatting of the
Replat.
subdivision that exists, that was approved by the planning commission and council. But that would also tell us, and tell council when it came, if it came before you, what bond you should be having to require in place before you file the replanning.
So does the planning commission have a proposed revision showing this new road that exists?
Yeah, there was a map that had that new road on it that was presented to us, yes, but it still had two of the old roads.
Okay.
Only one road was taken off, and that was the one that was being moved.
This is part of a cleaning up process?
Part of it is.
Some of it is.
I think there needs to be some education on what a subdivision is and the process by the developer, for the developer. I mean, it seems like we erase roads, we add them. I mean, the process is in shreds. And we're in court.
How's the golf course going?
We got enough issues to talk about tonight, Paul.
Okay, just wondered.
I think I hear Jim proposing maybe a middle way here of dealing with the cleanup piece of it separately from the other issue, which is just the money side of the bond. I don't see any public purpose in making any changes with Greenview Lane.
Is that the one going down the hill?
That's the one that goes down
I agree.
to Armitage. When we have had vacation requests come to council before, I believe that in committee, people were just told, no.
That's correct.
And I feel like that would be appropriate to do in the case of Greenview Lane, if the committee members are in agreement.
I think we ought to take it to council.
You know, one of the issues with leaving Greenview on there, even if we leave it on there and apply a bond, it's still not in our plans to develop that road.
But I think we're saying we need you to develop that road to some extent.
But in a month or two, who knows? Lance, maybe next week you'll want it. Paul?
I think in terms of vacating roads, often we actually already have the roads in terms of this. There's a little bit of
They
difference.
already exist. Well,
Yes.
there was an unimproved alley right-of-way that has a sewer line in it
Mhm.
that came before council 2 or 3 years ago. And because there's a sewer line in it, even though it's not a road,
Mhm.
we didn't,
Vacate it.
right. This is a gravel road now. Paul?
I'm not on your committee, but I don't see any reason why to vacate any of these. I mean, again, in terms of vacating and giving up stuff, it's not the case. And I am a little bit thrown off by the concept of doing a final plat before you do the engineering, because this is what we're seeing with Altamont. So, but that's just me, just one member.
And the issue with Altamont seems different to me because the road was moved, and I think the plan is to come immediately back with a plat revision and plat it in the actual location. So.
And we do have.
And there's
bond
no
on that.
intent, and we have the bond on part of it. And there's no intention of building the road that's on the plat map in that location. It has been moved. So that one seems different to me.
Will it be done by the 31st of August, when the revocable credit expires?
It expires.
That's what it says. 31st of August, 2007. So that would have to expire at the wishes of the service director or his designee.
And Stone Ridge Court doesn't serve a public purpose and doesn't have anything physically existing there. It doesn't currently serve any homes or other parts of the project that have been constructed. Is that correct?
Right.
That's just a line on a map. I mean, it's a legal line on a legal map, but it isn't functioning in a public way right now.
But if you take out the road, bring that down here.
Does,
Keep going. Are there platted lots around this or anything platted around it?
Stone Ridge?
Stone Ridge.
No.
Yes, there's a lot, they also have other public road. But the way a vacation is the adjacent property owners go to the midpoint. One's added to the one plat, one's added to the other. There is, I remember
that
in the
makes it more
original plat,
confusing.
some open space.
Well, yeah, there are two lots.
Right.
So this is a little bit bigger, that's a little bit bigger.
Isn't it bad for us to be saying, when people come into a place, look at a lot, look at a plat, have some assumptions about what's going to happen, and then we're going to change them, and then change them back? I mean, isn't
But
that
the
kind of
Stone
dangerous?
Ridge Road, are there properties on either side of that, is what I'm asking?
This doesn't create any land
Number 10 and number 11 here. One is 2.8 acres, the other's 5.2.
Both of those still have frontage on
So you're
University Estates.
talking about cutting driveways from University Estates Boulevard to those.
No. This might be able to help you more.
Okay, so
This
this
is basically what
access from here.
front section will be presented to the planning commission. Some of those
Okay, they want to.
Where's Stone Ridge?
So there's
Okay,
still-
it's here.
This is where Stone Ridge would
Right.
be reconstructed.
Okay.
So it won't be a
So it won't be a cul-de-sac
Won't be
anymore.
a cul-de-sac, and it comes at an angle,
And it'll make Altamont.
which will
not
make
be-
that a loop. So it won't be one long cul-de-sac.
Okay. Which looks better, obviously, but what you're saying is just, for the time being, just take it all away.
Let's take this yellow part away.
Because, and this
Well,
Altamont,
that yellow part.
Right.
Here.
and Altamont didn't go like this. That's
See,
where
it's
it
over
was.
here. Yeah, it's way over
And
here.
we thought we had to
And then
leave
when it
this
come
stub
like
on
this.
here for access to these two properties, and at the planning commission,
They took
we
that.
agreed not to do that because they both have access to the roads. That stub is coming out of there, so that's.
But that's not, what is that? That's not stone.
That's
It's
not
not
a
all-
That was the old
This is-
Altamont.
Oh, that's the old one.
Well, I mean, to me, this looks like better planning than this does. Fair?
Planning?
Plus, notice they've
Are you sure that's the word?
reconfigured these lots. There's no 13 in there anymore.
Right.
These got bigger, this got smaller, so there's some other stuff besides the roads that were
And that's
Right.
not part of what we're only being asked
Exactly,
to
but
consider
I
the
guess
Right, we're
what
only
I'm
considering the
trying to
roads,
do
right.
is think in terms of what is the ultimate effect and what's the best for us,
Once we
the
get
city.
this, this road's complete to right here, that's why I've got colored in.
Okay.
We've, been in contact with Bray and the mayor about accepting this road once we get the plat. It's a
Oh, that
road,
would be a good
obviously,
plan.
But, and then we'll transfer and take a new bond to do the rest.
Well, there will be a maintenance bond for 2 years.
Right. Yeah, that's part of, when they accept this, that has to be in place.
So the pink part now is a cul-de-sac? You can't get out once you get in? You gotta turn around and go,
We'll have a turnaround for that.
well, a turnaround. But it is a cul-de-sac, right? Until this part's finished.
Completed, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
What's the scale on this map right here?
Over there.
Oh, okay.
I'm more concerned about the people who live out there now.
Right. And I think
And-
this secondary access is critical.
I do too.
And I don't see any reason to consider releasing that. It serves a public purpose.
It's Altamont.
Right.
What does Altamont serve? Right, not,
There's nobody on it right now. There's townhouses, aren't there? Those are the-
Well, that's what we're in court over. It's
Yes.
the PUD that's being
PUD.
constructed without any approvals.
oh, that's that.
So do we
Including the road.
change the condition of the court stuff if we approve this?
Is there any impact on what's happening in court if we consider this?
You're only dealing with roads, not PUDs.
Okay.
Well, that was my suggestion.
So, in the past, if council didn't intend to go along with a vacation request, it just didn't get placed on the agenda. Now Nancy, because of our previous agenda item, is suggesting that we should go ahead and do that. What do you think, Jim?
Go ahead and do which?
Put them all up and vote one way or the other.
I reiterate, I think it's council's responsibility to give resolution to petitioners who come before us. We either say solidly yes or solidly no.
Amy?
I mean, if we are to create a precedent, I mean, I think that if it doesn't go on any sort of other record, then reading, such an ordinance, or at least, voting on it one way or the other, does send the message that we are communicating here in committee now.
Shall they be introduced by all members of council?
No. I thought
Introduced by all members of council?
Absolutely not.
No way.
Not unless there's a learning curve associated with it. Because how many different times is this? Well, I don't know. It's an attitudinal transplant, maybe. I don't know.
Who wants to introduce them?
Well, how are you going to put it all in one ordinance?
I think they're three separate ordinances.
Okay.
Three? For each road?
One for each road.
One for each road?
Just like the
planning
letters
and
are.
members of the planning and development committee.
No way.
So if you don't want it, I will.
The man from Process.
Okay, you're gonna sponsor it? Is that
Yeah,
what
you
you're
go ahead and do it.
I'll introduce it.
You go ahead.
In them, I guess. I
Them, plural.
didn't realize that.
Well, I think we have a pretty good understanding of what we're looking at here. Yeah?
Say so.
Any other questions for Mr. Holmes or Mr. Ruff while they're here? Thank you.
I lost my agenda.
Okay.
This will be up for third reading in the late January, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. All right. I have another miscellaneous. Did everybody get? No, everybody didn't get this. I wanted to give you a little update about Shady Lane.
Mm-hmm, what's going on?
I've attended a couple of county commissioner meetings. They are going to have a meeting out there at Shady Lane on Thursday to look at the condition of the road. I think they're going to be considering accepting the road so that it can be maintained. Some of the discussion was about the current condition of the road and what it might cost to,
Bring up the standard.
bring it up to standard. Bill Tyson went out and visited a couple times. He doesn't think it's in horrible condition right now. It does need winter road maintenance to keep it safe. But they did work up, the county engineer, I think, worked up a draft budget of what it would take, and this would probably be somewhere down the road that the county would be able to look at CDBG funding for part of the work, but not for all of it. And because of the fact it's in the 3 Mile area and some problems that happened in the process in dealing with the bond, the question was asked whether we would consider helping cover the costs of bringing this road up to standard. I don't think that the request will be very significant, but we really are going to have to wait until it is a public road and see what they're asking for. What I expressed in the meeting was that we would probably, I said, I'm one of 7 and can't speak for all of council, but we would probably be interested in seeing an effort to go to the responsible people and try to collect the money back if we do go ahead and pay, because this is something that shouldn't have gotten into this situation. So an attempt to try to prevent these kinds of things from happening again, to actually try to go after that money. if we do help fix the road.
What's the draft budget?
The total estimate right now is about $24,000. They're asking the county engineer's office to look and see if they have any extra guardrail around that could be used and things that might be able to help save some money. So it's all being discussed, but we don't have a clear amount as far as what we would be asked for. But I don't think it's going to be a huge amount of money. Did you want to?
Debbie standing, shaking them to get the money out of the pockets.
Take a field trip to collect our money.
Yeah.
Is there
Stand
anything you
outside
want
with
to
us.
add to that, Mabel?
Well, somebody owns the balance of Stone Ridge.
Mhm.
And, you just determine who that property owner is and put a lien on it for the amount of money.
Yeah. Yeah. Carol?
I'm confused on an ongoing basis about this whole 3-mile range in terms of what our responsibilities are because we have some input. How often might we be asked to step up to the plate and fix something that's totally messed up because it went through our planning commission, because it's in the 3-mile limit? And I find that a very frustrating concept and not a very clear one.
It's the first I've seen it. So it doesn't very often. The 3-mile limit concept is that it's the right of the city to be able to enforce their subdivision standards, in essence. And I think you've seen, even to a certain degree, setback standards of bulk controls, because you've had lenders come to you and say, oh, we found out this house is within the 25-foot setbacks. It's not in the city, but they still want something, variance granted from council. And that's where the inherent data, we go to our standards then, but we don't inspect it. We leave it to the county to do the inspections on the roads. That's the county engineer. They don't have anybody on placement of a site. There's no permit that they have to get. There's nothing there. And we don't like to spend the taxpayers' money outside of the city. The danger that you have is that if at some point in time, if some of this land that's relatively close to the city ever does get annexed, you could have something that's to county standards versus city standards. It's a subdivision. And is that worth then the effort of the planning commission and council to approve or not approve those subdivisions?
I don't have a problem with us approving or not approving. I have a problem when the township says, it's not ours, they did it. And then the county says, it's not ours, they did it. And all of a sudden, somebody has to solve a situation, and it somehow comes back to us financially for part of it.
Well, I don't know that there is a legal basis for that it is. I think your law director would argue it. Debbie and I always said at the meetings we would approach council to see if there would be some, but that was with the proviso that a determination was made of who the legal property owner is this expense should be borne by, and that the city would bill them for it.
Right.
So we qualify, but it's in essence a loan or an advance, because we feel that there is some obligation because people bought property. They built their homes, they've made a big investment in their lives there, and they've relied upon us as a government to say, yep, these are going to have roads and going to have the water and the sewer and the storm drainage and all the other things.
And I think for the most part, the tone of those meetings was very much oriented toward solving the problem.
Right.
And I think that we've all been clear that we don't want to create any kind of precedent here, and we do want to make sure that the person who was responsible for constructing the road pay for it.
But what if that person's declared bankruptcy?
But somebody's taken over the property.
Somebody owns the property.
Okay. A bank.
Yeah.
It's just like when we declared, it's been some years ago, but as an example, a house, I think on Franklin Street, to be condemned, the person didn't tear it down, we tore it down, we added it to the property taxes. Eventually, when that piece of property sold, the proud new buyer got a bill for, attached to the property for about $3,000 of what it was. I mean, that's the same concept that we would have here, is that at some point, if the land has to go to some ownership, or it's the bank's responsibility that we're closed.
So this is probably something that would come back to us in the spring in the form of, when we're looking at, street budget issues that, we may ask for, not a huge amount of money to help deal with this, but with the intention to go after the property owner to make sure that we aren't creating any kind of precedent of spending taxpayer money outside the city. Well,
So I assume we're talking about a portion of the 24,000?
Right.
Okay. And sometime, if we do go through this approval process for the money, can we actually get a synopsis of how this actually fell through the cracks? I mean, it's been very convoluted, I know, but just so we prevent it from happening again, I'd like to see.
I think that the changes we're making to the bond requirements language
should fix the problem.
Were designed to tighten up and fix this so that it doesn't happen again.
Okay.
You still get the situation is, I have not talked to anybody that sells bonds of this nature. And with those kinds of language things in there, will they write them? I don't know. Well, what requirements does a bank have to write an irrevocable letter of credit in that amount for the purchase of a, and is it, don't know. And then if you get bankruptcy courts involved and everything else, I don't know how solid it is. I mean, it's as solid as we can make it, but it's not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll hear about it again, but since we've had citizens here to talk with us about it, I wanted to report back to you and share information.
But just in the spirit of announcing our votes before anything comes up, I would not be in favor of that, of expending any money in that particular situation.
Paul has a proposed amendment for the landscape ordinance that he put on
Yes,
the
I
agenda here
think
on
you should have
miscellaneous.
found in your box a proposal amendment to the landscape ordinance. This is recommended, actually, a discussion at the last Thursday's tree commission. And actually, it's an evolution coming out of where to place trees. It's a section, in addition to 3703, Section C. There is no Section C right now. And really what it's asking for is that when they submit plans for landscaping, they should also include underground utilities. Most of the tree commissioners are very cognizant of the telephone poles and utility lines, but there has been a case where they put various trees down various places, only to have to move them because they didn't know there was storm sewers underneath it. So they're just putting something additional in, saying, can we have a map approving with the underground as well as the above ground infrastructure. Most developers already have this on one of their leaved flats, so it shouldn't be too much of a burden for anybody coming in front of the tree commission, but it will make the tree commissioners have a better grasp of what needs to be done. That's the first section, to add that. The other one is actually installation, and that's just a caveat that you're supposed to be calling the Ohio Utilities Protection Service so that you don't dig into a power line. And that's just an educational piece of legislation. I put out below, the handout that you've got also has in very small print, cut and pasted out of the city code where it would go in. Second section would go in 3703A, which is part of the installation section. The other part would just be amended to below B, of course, just another section.
Could I suggest that a little bit of language be put in there to say that when the tree commission plants public trees in public right-of-ways, that they also look at the underground infrastructure at that point, because I hear complaints from, for instance, from Abrio's Pizza about a tree that was planted right over some kind of water line. So
I think that's what they're discovering, so this is why, I think they'll be aware of it too.
So not only the developer, but also we as the the city as the planter needs to be looking at that.
Okay. Okay, I don't know if that,
I don't see that language in there, but
no, that's assuming that the developer is doing most of the landscaping, but I can see wanting to add that.
So
Okay.
street trees that we plant.
I assumed they went through a big process in the staff level, but I may be wrong. Okay. So include also tree, additions in the right-of-way, city right-of-way. I'll put that in and get back to Alvy and the tree commission with that.
Okay.
So it won't be up for a reading next week, but,
Paul,
yes.
having attended recently a couple meetings of the Government Relations Committee of the Chamber of Commerce, they talked about a fairly productive meeting with the Tree Commission to talk about some of their issues with the landscape ordinance, particularly the buffer requirement when there are two properties that are zoned the same next to each other, and particularly in the closer in smaller lot areas. And they felt like there had been a really productive discussion. Is there language coming forward from that?
Not that I know of right now. I'll check. Okay. I actually sat in that productive meeting. I guess I wouldn't have called it productive, but okay.
Okay.
You must have given.
It was David Ingram and myself in terms of tree commission members.
Okay.
So, I'll have to ask and see what if they have anything to throw in there. Okay.
Paul?
Yeah, go
I have
ahead.
excuse me, I have a question about, I don't have a problem with this amendment to begin with. However, where it says prior to the approval, the very last line of section C, I'm just wondering if that language should be a little tighter as to which departments actually need to review, since it does say prior to the approval. If it should be more specific as to which departments need to approve it, so one department doesn't say we didn't see it, or...
A lot of this was put together by Steve Pearson. I was under the impression he said that there's a checkoff list for various developments that almost all the departments have to, you may correct me about this, Rick, that almost all the departments are checking off on what is there. In other words, you get a development there, map,
Sure, I guess it just doesn't state that here, so I just was...
Okay, yeah, I think that's on an administrative level. And again, I think Steve was telling us that it's being done. During a planning commission meeting, right now, we have Mr. Pearson attending, and we have Ron Lucas, which of course represent two of the, two people right there in terms of two departments.
Right.
And I'm assuming that eventually water gets involved one way or the other. Of course, we're covering streets at that point and code. So I don't know if we need to change it that much, but I don't know if we need to, Department of Water, Sewer, Fire Department, other city departments. So it almost includes everybody. But that's a process. You have staff meetings regularly with this type of stuff, right? Or is it development?
We don't do it at the staff meetings, but we have a technical review that looks over plans.
And all departments do that, or? Okay.
And all of a sudden, there's nothing in the landscaping ordinance that triggers that. And if they put in some things there, and then all of a sudden the fire chief says, I can't turn the fire truck, or the water people say, well, it's right in there next to the water line. There's no formal review. It's never presented to them. It's just approved by the planning commission or the tree commission. It goes to the developer. He builds it, and then all of a sudden we find it.
So this is what this is intended to do, so you guys...
Well, that's partly it, but there's also a couple other parts in there, but
Okay. So do you think anything needs to be changed? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's part of it is, since the processes are not necessarily, don't totally go, we review it technically because we're asked to by the developer before they do their final plans to submit to the state architecture. They never look at all my landscaping section before they do that, because that's where their concern is. The landscaping usually comes more toward the end or as it's being gone through. And at that point, there's no re-review by staff.
Okay.
Based only on the landscaping, and so making the developer put in where all the water and the sewer lines and all that makes, and telephone, because usually the telephone lines and underground electric, they put in during that project.
Yeah, and they have schematics for that already.
And there, any easements should be noted.
Okay.
So I don't, you know, I mean, part of it is I'm a little, you can have your own administrative rules as a commission as to, this is the checklist of what I want submitted to me.
Yeah.
But this is actually putting it in the law, so maybe it's overkill, but okay.
We're, again, I know we had to move some trees once. I think it was Bennington's maybe.
Yeah.
They